Hey, welcome back to the Blue Collar Off-Road Podcast, episode 129. I'm Graham. I'm here with Luke, Richie, and Cody. And we got Harry Hendricks on today, who I'm going to let Luke sort of introduce. I know he's got an XJ, or he had an XJ. I don't know if he still does. I know he's from Connecticut.
Yep.
Yep.
And yeah, Luke, take it away. I'm going to
Well-
butcher it otherwise.
He's just an OG. He's been wheeling he was one of the first large rigs I got to see when I got into wheeling, and I dragged Kish into wheeling. So I met him through SIS, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think so.
And anyways, Harry, nice to have you on. How'd you get into all this stuff?
Yeah, so happy to be here. Yeah, so I guess as a kid, I was just always sort of interested in things with wheels and moving parts and stuff like that, but not necessarily like cars as much. I always just thought, the fact that you could put a vehicle in some other mode that would make it so that you could drive it through some sort of terrain that it couldn't otherwise do was sort of intriguing. And I always just thought that was really cool how it worked. And the fact that it just sort of like opened up this other possibility of things that you could do with it. Mm-hmm. Just kind of always had that spirit as a kid. Neither of my parents were really like car people or anything really per se. So, I kind of sought it out on my own. And I had one of my friends in high school he actually had a 2-door 4-cylinder 5-speed Cherokee, and it just had like stock sized BFG all-terrains and like American Racing like aluminum wheels or whatever, and like that was it. It was completely stock, and like, but it was just like, and he had like a little grill guard on it with like some lights, and I was just like, this thing is so cool. I want a Jeep. Like, I gotta have a Jeep. And it's like I got a couple cars from my parents, and they were kind of beaters, and they didn't last very long. And it was like, all right. And it's like things just kind of came together. And I had saved up a little bit of money because I was hoping that I would be able to kind of make that happen, and just kind of happened. And so went out and bought a 97 Cherokee. This was, I think, 2005. And it was, yeah. Well, 97, I don't know. I guess it's fine. I've heard mixed things about them. That it's like this weird.
They've all got their problems, right? Every year has its own quirk.
Yeah, sure. And so, yeah, 2005, and then it's like, I have no knowledge of how to do anything. It's like this. It's like a late model used car at this point. It's got like 118,000 miles on it, zero rust. The air conditioning works. Like, it was like a pretty nice car. It was like $4,000 or whatever back in 2005. So I was like, this thing is awesome. And of course, then it's like I'm like trying to put more lights on it and trying to figure out how to just put like different wheels on it. And my parents don't get it, but they're like, yeah, okay, do whatever, do what you got to do. And and like, it was just like this, it was like the sort of quintessential high school kid Jeep Cherokee with like a, black Krager wheels and like some lights on the roof bar, like, and a grill guard with lights and big Hella 500s and shit like that. And I was just driving around thinking I was cool, driving over snowbanks and shit like that.
Yeah.
And,
I gotta hop in here.
Yeah.
The Hella 500s are such a core memory,
right,
from that vintage. I had to go out and buy a set to put on my shitbox now, because like at this point they're actually retro.
I was gonna say, can you even buy them anymore?
You can buy the they're not the 500s anymore. They call them like the Rally series, but they look identical, and they come with the stupid Hella caps and all that. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was like Walmart. You just walk in, $60, you walk out with a couple Hella 500s. It's like the greatest thing.
Yeah, dude.
I had like 8 of them on my Jeep at one point. It was ridiculous. Like,
oh my God.
I should dig through and send you guys some pictures later on. Like, it's gone through so many evolutions. Like, I built this roof rack for it. It had like I built a spare tire carrier for it. Just like all this stuff.
It might not
And
be the 500s. It's the 8-inch ones.
oh, okay, yeah, the 500s I think are the 6-inch ones.
Yeah.
They
I
were
got
just like cheap.
Yeah. Anyways, they're just like such a old school look at this point. It's
Yeah.
hilarious to see them because everyone's running light bars now. So like,
Yeah,
gotta
those
be
little
different.
pods and all the
Right, LEDs and
whatever the
pods. I
hell you
know it's
can
like
bolt on.
something made me think about Hella 500 somewhat recently, and I was like, man, I wonder if you can even buy those anymore. Because now it's like you walk into Harbor Freight or Walmart or whatever, and it's everything's like you guys said, it's just like LED pods or LED light bars, and like that's just everything now. There's nobody
Yeah,
does
you
anything with
still
halogen.
buy
Why would
them.
you do anything with halogen at this point? But
Because you're not very smart and you wanted a set of floodlights that will bolt to the bumper, and when you smash them into something, you're not going to feel too bad because it's like $100 for a pair.
you can get some pretty cheap LEDs if you want to, though.
Yeah, but it doesn't have the same like.
It
old
sure doesn't.
school
It sure
vibe.
does not. It sure does not. So, so in high school, my same buddy that had the 2-door Cherokee, he was like, I want a Wrangler. So he gets a Wrangler. It basically does all the same exact things to it. It's got stock size BFGs with some alloy wheels and KC highlights all over it. And we just like go out and like get our Jeep stuck in the mud or whatever in the wood. There's no rocks in upstate New York. Like, so it's just like, I lived at like there's apple orchards all over the place, or like just people that we know that had like property with trails through it or whatever, and we'd go drive around in the mud and get stuck. And it's like after a while we were, neither one of our parents were like super keen on that. So he was like, my buddy's dad was like, you know what, I need something to plow the driveway. So he found this YJ. It was like an 80 something, so it had the 4.2 in it, and like that awful carburetor, whatever those things have, just ran like absolute dog shit. It really did not ever run right. And so we just it had like a Dana 35 in the back. We didn't even know anything about lockers, Weldon diffs, anything like that. It was just all stock everything. We just put like some 31-inch LTBs on it and would just beat the shit out of that thing in the woods. And we had, we like went to Harbor Freight, bought the $300 winch, bolted it on the front, and we just went in the woods and we would just beat the balls off that thing. And we had so much fun with it. And then I don't know why it even happened, but we came across this rotted out J10, and then we tried to. Well, we did. We put the 360 and 727 out of the J10 into the Beast. That's what we called it, because I guess that's what you called. It's like people drive around with the Beast written on the side of their hood.
Did it have chuck nuts?
Yeah.
Please tell me it had chuck nuts.
So it's like, no, it did not say Beast.
Dang it.
So we put the 360 in, and it like that never really ran right either.
Well, they never do. They're such
just,
junky
yeah,
motors.
right. It was
I hate
just
them.
like looking back now, I'm just like, oh my god, what were we doing? Like we had no idea what we were doing at all. So that was just, and it was honestly, it was kind of the same thing. We just went out in the woods, beat the balls off it. It would overheat, and then we'd let it cool down and start it back up and go beat the balls off it some more. And that was kind of it. We just did that. I think it's still around. I think he said he sold it a few years ago, and some kid bought it and was gonna like fix all the shit that we did wrong on it. It's like just like thinking about like.
Was it a yellow one?
Please tell me it was yellow.
No, it was silver.
Oh, thank God.
Oh, that would be way too funny.
It would have been even better if he said.
I mean, I know the one I've got is beat, so just I don't think it would have been beat. It had to have been babied at one point in its life, otherwise it'd be gone right now.
Sure.
Sure.
Right. If it's survived this long, somebody cared about it for at least a little while.
Yes.
Yeah. It was the perfect timing because Graham got, I can't remember if his is a J10 or a J20,
It's a 20.
but it was like 2 years ago. So, possibly would have fit in. And it came from New York.
It did.
Oh, no. The truck was done after we took the drivetrain and everything out of it and sent it off to scrap. So no, it was definitely not that truck.
All right. Well,
those are cool. Those are cool trucks though, man. They really are.
Yeah. They just, people always ask what it is. They're like, what is that? It's
right.
Like, it's a Jeep, actually.
It is ridiculous how often at gas stations you got bothered on our journey to.
I know. It was insane.
Every old guy's like, "Whoa, what's
I
that?"
haven't seen one of those in forever.
Yeah.
Or
My
just it's all the
grandfather's
same
something-
canned
Yeah.
comments, but they're all it's still fun to get them, right? You're like, "Yep, I got a piece of shit old truck that barely runs, but it's
You
cool."
probably had to stop at a gas station every 180 miles or whatever, so there was plenty
Yeah,
of that.
your tank is tiny. Like for that as big of a truck as it is, it's got a tiny
Right.
little gas tank. It's got
Right.
maybe as much fuel as my Cherokee, and it uses about twice as much of it. So,
Yep.
yeah, typical.
Yeah, I'm not saying they were the best engineered vehicles, but they were
Oh
definitely
no,
cool.
not at all. But they're cool. That's all that matters.
I think the same could be said about the XJ though.
Well, it's
Sorry
better.
to keep interrupting.
It's a lot better. It's a lot better than those, though.
Yes, I mean, there was a little more thought put into those. I think the J20 was just a J10, J20 Wagoneers, all that stuff. It's just sort of like it's a body. Now fill it with the shit that it needs to run and drive, and
Right.
we'll deal with the issues later.
Right. Right.
So, was that the same XJ that became the? You only had one XJ, right?
The one and only.
Okay. So, how did you end up in Connecticut, and how did it end up being what it became?
Yeah. So then I went to graduated college, and then that was my daily driver in college for 4 years, and I did again all the stupid things that you do when you don't know anything and don't have any money, which is like lift it like a half an inch at a time, and then like decide that like the back needs another half inch, and then like the front needs another half an inch to match that, and it's just like you're just absolutely wasting time. Like it's just a gigantic waste of time. Like I probably had the leaf packs apart on that thing like a dozen times. Like my buddy, his dad was a GM mechanic, and he just had these pile of leaf springs, so I would like go through and like just cut like oh this one looks kind of good, like cut it out, and like you just find a big long socket head cap screw, bolt it back through, and say, oh, it's a little high now, all right, take it back apart, take that one out, try a different, like just like gigantic waste of time to get like dialed the suspension height in by like half an inch or whatever. Just like, so I farted around for 4 years in college doing stupid shit like that because I didn't have any money. And then I graduated, and when I graduated college, I got I got an '03 Focus, just like hatchback 2-door 5-speed. It was a great little car. And then it was like game on with the Cherokee. It was like, okay, now I can actually do something with this that I don't have to rely on it. So for about a year and a half, I worked in Rochester, New York, at Thurston Mechanical, I think they are now. It was P&D Thurston at the time. They're small little mechanical contracting company. That's kind of where I learned a lot about welding and fabrication, and just that whole kind of world of working with metal and things like that. And
Yeah. Where you
yeah.
learn all the stuff that you don't learn with the degree.
Yeah, right. And I have this conversation with a lot of people that just don't know because they don't have engineering degrees or whatever, but engineering degrees do not teach you anything practical whatsoever. And that's not necessarily criticism, because that's not what it's supposed to do. I think they just expect that you're going to learn the practical stuff on the job. The engineering degree is for teaching you all of the math and the theory and the science and everything behind it, so that you have a little bit more context of why things are the way they are.
Yep.
And to be honest with you, unless you like go work at NASA, or like you're like a really, really, I don't know, person at an aerospace company or something that's like designing parts of jet engines, you probably don't use 99% of what you learn in engineering school. But that's a whole other thing. I won't digress on that.
I gotta hop in there real quick. I have met more people, because I work on the opposite side. I'm doing tool and die.
Yep.
That think that they have practical understanding of the way something works because they have a degree. The company I work for now likes to hire freshly graduated people,
Yep.
and there is a major learning curve to both sides of it.
Sure.
And it's very, very funny to watch reality come in, if you will.
Yep.
On the other hand, though, I have so much to learn about the reason why certain stuff does what it does.
Yep.
I just have the experience of it does this, so therefore I have to figure out how to prevent it from doing this.
Sure.
Sorry.
It's so important to have as much of both sides as you can. It really is. And again, this is like a whole conversation that's not necessarily for this podcast, but it's like, to me, there is a glaring hole in the middle. Like everywhere I've ever worked, there's just this glaring hole where all the people that are in the machine shop are super good at that, and then all the engineers sit and work on SolidWorks all day, and they're super good at that. And then like it a lot of the times, they get to know each other and they work together or whatever, but it's just like there's just this big hole in the middle, and I don't understand why there isn't more of like a job market for jobs like that. It's just like it's strange to me. Like it's just this thing that's just like big and out in the open, and like it just kind of doesn't get addressed. Like all the positions that I've had in the last few years where I kind of am that middle person where I'm like, I can sit on SolidWorks and design something, but then I can also go out and talk to a machinist about, exactly how the details and practical issues with making whatever it is I want to make, and we can work through it. But like, it's like it took me some work and some time to find those kinds of jobs. Like it seems like when an employer that's looking for that person finds you, they're like, oh my God, we've been looking for somebody like you forever. We just keep getting these guys that have done nothing but stare at a computer screen for their whole career. But I'm like, where, like, but it's like hard to find those jobs too. So it's just a weird thing.
So this is the Tangent Off-Road podcast, so don't feel bad about that at all. But
Okay.
So I have been actively searching for that type of job down here, and I kind of have been struggling with that because it's a very hard thing to market, right?
It is.
I have an understanding, like I can open AutoCAD and pull up, a SolidWorks file and pull the dimensions out of it and maybe make a couple of changes to the dimensions and be like, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to thicken the bracket up by 1/4 of an inch because XYZ.
Yep.
But that's not something that you can just go and put on a resume due to practical applied experience. And working on the Jeep stuff has actually been a massive boost to my career because I've had to it's given me so much more opportunity to be the engineer behind something.
I couldn't agree more. With that whole idea.
So you get to see what works and what doesn't work, and then if you take what you learn doing that and you go into the work world, if you will, and you treat it the same way, you can get really far with it. It's just not something that's easy to put into words on paper for a job application. And coming from the engineering side, I got to imagine it's just as hard as coming from the manufacturing side to try and bridge that gap. Anyways, sorry for tangenting, but it's what we do.
No, and you know what? The last, actually, I think every job interview I've had, to some extent, the fact that like this is sort of what I do when I'm not working. I at least like bring it up, or I have just like it's like a one-liner at the bottom of my resume or whatever. And every person that's ever interviewed me has asked about it, and everyone that's ever hired me has said the fact that you seek out doing stuff like that on your own was definitely a contributing factor to why I chose to hire you. So and it absolutely is, like, because when you're out there in the driveway or your garage by yourself and something's not going the way that you thought it was going to, it's really not on anybody else but you to figure out how to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that is a real, like, that is when you really do the most learning. And even if you go and you call your buddy or you get online or whatever, and you kind of do a little, you step back and you got to kind of call in some help or whatever. But like the fact that like you got stuck and then you kind of like pushed through it, like that is where that's really how you learn how to like get to where you want to go with things. And it's sort of like after a while, after you do that enough times, you're like, well, I can't imagine even 5 years ago, like I guess at this point it's my buggy's been done for 2 years, but when I started my buggy, I can't imagine at 5 years before that point thinking that I was going to build a buggy. Like that would have just been like an anxiety inducing like super stressful idea. Like, and that's basically, and more or less, I mean, there's a lot of factors, but that's part of why my Cherokee just went along as long as it did, is that I was just like, it's working. And I'm just going to keep using it until I see a reason not to.
So on that note, another person that comes in around this time period would be Buffalo Bill. You remember him?
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. Phil lives in Fairfield. I see him. He doesn't have that silver one anymore. He's got it's still like an old body style Cherokee with like, the TJ Moab wheels and like some 32s and probably like, like a 3 or 4 inch lift and hunter green or that kind of like sparkly dark green, whatever. Yeah. That's just like, he just drives it around Fairfield. I see him every once in a while and wave at him, or I see him in the grocery store or whatever.
He's a great dude.
Really great guy. Really
got
good
me
guy.
into gunsmithing. And
Really?
I put a line at the bottom of my resume about that, and then I put a good bit about like learning how to bend tube and whatnot. So those two things have gotten me more questions on
Yep.
every job interview I've ever gone on.
Yep.
Because at this point, like, I'm building custom AKs and whatnot. Those things have gotten me more questions and more time spent than the entire rest of the resume.
Sure. Yep.
The only other thing that comes close is the 3D printing experience. It's
sure. Well, but that's it's the type of thing where you got to work through some problems, and it's also kind of relevant to the field that you're in. So
exactly. I suppose that we could go back to your XJ, and I've got a funny little anecdote about how you almost got me beat by my dad. So when I first met you, I was probably 16 or 17 at the time.
Oh my God, were you that young?
I was that young.
Oh my God, dude. I don't know if I realized that you were that young or appreciated that you were that young. Because I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm telling you all the stupid shit that I did when I was like 20. Yeah. And it was even stupider when I was 16. Like, nobody can talk to you. Nobody can tell you anything. Yes. You have to just learn some hard lessons by yourself. But anyway, go ahead.
Now, some of the stupid shit that I was asking makes a lot more sense. But, so, I remember walking in, and I think I had agreed to buy your Super Swampers, your 8.8, and a bunch of other stuff. And I told my dad this, because I had that black Cherokee after I had, like, destroyed my 88 Cherokee. And my dad got so fucking mad because I was going to buy your beat old Swampers and that welded 8.8. He told me that if I bought that welded 8.8 that I could just start packing my shit and move the fuck out.
Wow.
Because I'm going to kill myself because I can't drive good.
Wow.
That's odd.
Well,
I mean, he wasn't completely wrong. You can't drive good.
No, I mean, this would have been your only vehicle, I'm presuming, when you were 16.
It was my only vehicle at that point in time.
So, yeah, I can imagine that if I was talking to my 16-year-old kid and I saw that he wanted to buy a welded rear and some clapped-out Swampers for his daily driver, I would probably feel a very strong need to impress on them that was a very, very bad idea.
He was scared because with my 88, I had spun it out during that massive blizzard that we got in the October storm. And I had to have him come and pull me out because I was being dumb and trying to show off.
Sure.
And that was right in that time period where I got the other XJ and I was starting to modify it. And that's right about when... So that was fresh on his mind because, like, cops were involved and all that other fun stuff.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, I mean, I got to admit, I'm 35 at this point, but and I have a kid now, and I maybe I would have worded it differently than your dad, but I'm with your dad on this one as far as his stance on the matter.
He wasn't wrong. I'm not going to say he was wrong. The only thing I'm going to say is I probably shouldn't have told him at 9 o'clock on a Friday night after, like, he got back in from, I think he came in from Maryland because he's an aircraft mechanic.
So, sure. Like, yeah, right. Drop that on him right at 9 o'clock after he's been driving for 4 hours.
Exactly,
Yeah.
So I remember though, just like watching that transformation that was going on, and like Richie can probably attest to this. I was like glued to the computer screen watching for updates between you and Nickel Dick.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, who? What in the fuck?
Matt DeNicola. He was
Oh,
very active
Oh.
in the SIS crowd at that during that time.
Yeah,
I got nervous. You're gonna tell me his name was actually Nickel Dick.
the
No.
Nickel Dick.
I have,
I
yeah,
thought
who
it-
knows where that name came from?
He was another character, man. He was something else.
I see him a couple times a year. He's still got his Cherokee. It's got 37 reds on it and tons, and it's
If you
just
see
kind of.
him, tell him
kinda
that I
hang-
said hi.
I will do that. We keep trying to get him to go wheeling because that thing's just sitting there. I haven't actually been to his new house, but from what I gather, it's just kind of sitting there, sad, and not
That is
wheeling.
very sad because I remember. We are getting ahead of ourselves here. All right, so back to your Cherokee. Let's actually get that story
Yeah.
going.
Let's
before-
finish up that whole thing. So, kind of on the same vein as why I said why I live in Fairfield and everything that I do, or just in Connecticut generally, is so Molly and Reed Dennis. I'm sure you at least have an idea who he is, right?
Oh yeah, I know
Yeah,
who
okay.
Reed is.
Yeah. Okay. So I'd known Molly my whole life. Like we went to kindergarten together, literally kindergarten. So I got to know Reed because he would come home like with Molly during the summer, like vacations and stuff like that. And so I got to know him, and they graduated the same college the same year that I did. And so while I was kind of back just working in Rochester, doing this sort of like, mix between CAD and welding and installing stuff in the field and all that, he from somebody that they knew from college, got a job at Pratt & Whitney as it was like at an outsourced company. So it's like one of those companies that like, you don't work directly for Pratt & Whitney, but you basically, you go there, you sit at Pratt in their offices every day and work for Pratt & Whitney all day. But it's some weird, it's like this
Like contract work almost, or
yes. Yeah. So the word isn't contracting, it's outsourcing.
gotcha.
And it's this important distinction for legal reasons that a contractor sits on site and can only do that for 2 years before they have to do something else. And outsourcing is technically like you're breaking off a very well-defined chunk of work and handing it over the wall. And I don't know. There's all kinds of. I'm not a expert on all that. I had to deal with it somewhat, but it's the same idea though. For all intents and purposes, you could consider him a contractor at that point. So he was in the process engineering group, and the manager for the design engineering group was looking for people, and they were like, oh, hey, we know somebody who just graduated with an engineering degree. So I called him. Another example of he just asked me what kind of work I was doing now, and I just explained to him that it's like I have to go into a chemical plant and figure out how to run a pipe, or design some bracket that's hold up some boiler that's falling down or whatever. And he was just kind of like, yep, okay, sounds good. I'll talk to my HR manager and we'll get this ball rolling. So like he just needed to hear that I was, just doing something other than like, I don't know, whatever, playing video games and sitting in my parents' basement or something like that. And so that was it. And so then I moved out here in October of 2011, and I lived with Molly and Reed until like the summer of 2018, kind of around there. So they moved 3 times. I moved with them. Great, whatever that is, 7 years or so. Yeah, so yeah, what a great 7 years. But we had Reed and I, when we first, they just had like before I came out, they just had this normal duplex that they lived in, and Reed had his YJ and his van again, and he would just kind of tinker on that or whatever, and it wasn't a big deal. And then I moved out, and I'm like, all right, we got to have a place to work on this stuff. And so it's just the weirdest thing. It was like this guy who was living in New York but had this house in Chester, and it had this 2-car garage behind it. and we like rented the garage for like a couple $100 a month, and it was like the most rickety old, like 1850s barn garage. Oh, it was just like just the stupid shit you do. And we did that, and I actually did the 3-link in my Cherokee in that garage, and it was absolutely awful. And so now I'm out in Connecticut. I've got I think at that point, while I worked in Rochester, I had done all the stupid things that you do at a Dana 30, like put a truss on it, and put I don't remember what else I did. Just put a locker in it. I put the 8.8 in. All that's the one that I was going to apparently sell to you. I completely forgot about that. I did all that out in Rochester, and then I towed it out here and did some work in that garage. And then basically the summer of 2012, I don't know if I've ever wheeled as much as I have in that year. Maybe I have. I probably have, but it was a lot. And I had my Suburban, and I had my open trailer, and I just wheeled and wheeled and wheeled. It was mostly at Roush, but I did Mabella.
I forgot about the Burbs.
Oh,
you and Kate
I did
Burbs.
Such a great tow rig. I wish I don't. Maybe tow rigs will come up later, but man, if I could go back and tell my 2011 self something now, I would say skip everything that you are going to do tow rig wise.
Just get a Bourbon,
the Suburban, and the open trailer until you're ready to go to the diesel with the enclosed trailer. Don't fart around with anything else in between. Save your money. All this other stuff. But anyway, that excellent tow. What a great tow rig. 4-wheel drive. You lay your sleeping bag out in the back. Half the time I didn't even take my tools and spare parts out of it because I was driving my Focus every day. I bought it for like $3,000, and it's like got 9 miles to the gallon. It's like, what more do you want from a tow rig that's $3,000? It's like super Swiss Army knife of a vehicle. But anyway, so I was going to Roush all the time, and I had talked about where I was just breaking Dana 30 shafts like it was my job, and I knew I didn't want to spend money on chromos and all this stuff, and I thought about putting Dana 44 in, and then decided not to do that. Blah 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 blah.
You're very smart for that, by the way.
It's a trap that it seems like everybody at least almost falls into, and some people actually do fall into it. But
So I bought DeNickel Dick's old 44, right? And I thought that was going to be a great idea. I had more money in that fucking Dana 44 than I have in my Super Duty tons now.
Yep.
Still.
Yep.
And I'm breaking Super Duty tons, not left and right, but like at least twice a season I'm breaking something on that axle.
Do you have chromos in it?
Nope.
Yeah, so stock shafts, and yeah, that sounds about right. But still, I completely know exactly what you mean, and believe me, like I had gone as far as like I think I bought a locker for a Dana 44 that I saw cheap used somewhere because like that was my plan. I was 100% going to do that.
Dude,
and
so I broke his Detroit.
Yeah,
like I shattered the Detroit on 35 stickies.
Yeah. What did you have? Did you have some Maxxis or something?
No, I got a set of General Grabber race program tires after I had left SIS.
Okay.
And they were terrible. Like absolutely
literally
abysmal.
after leaving SIS.
Yeah. So it broke the front Detroit. So like I cobbled that back together and all whatever. And I could break stub shafts on command with that thing.
Yep.
I went through 8 sets of lockouts, and when I say sets, I mean like 16 total lockouts.
16 lockouts.
I broke a stub at one point, and it blew out when it broke the stub, it broke the lockout, but it also like locked up inside and twisted over itself, so it blew the spindle out on a early Bronco axle.
Nice.
When it blew that out, it blew the bearing apart.
Oh,
so like
God. Where were you?
Richie's backyard.
Okay, all right. I was afraid you're gonna say like Roush or something, and then it's like, oh, fuck.
I was in Richie's backyard, so it got like left in the parking lot there because we dragged it out with his tractor.
Yep.
And it just sat there until I got the parts. But it was just like Dude, I was $3,000 into that fucking axle.
Yeah. Yep.
I bought my Super Duty tons for $400, and
Yep.
like I got my gears on sale through like Chad Bartley and all that stuff, and I bought my truss and everything, and I think I'm still at like 22 between the two axles.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that in reality, like you're making it work with stock shafts on a Dana 60, which is, I mean, it's probably not that much money to upgrade to chromos if you really decided you wanted to do it, but
it's one of those things where
if it's
as
working
much
for you, there's no reason to mess with it. Like if and it's not like, to your point, like you said, it's not like you're breaking them on command.
yeah, don't get me wrong, I can break them on command, but I know what the limit is,
And
and
it's right.
For me to go and get another set of 04 stock axles, even down here, I can get the pair for $150.
Yeah.
Ready to slap in. So it's
Yep.
like I think it was like 6 pairs compares to the cost of one set of full chrome ollies, and it's like, man, I break a stub shaft every 6 months. Fuck it, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
so I also don't have stickies. I've got Nitto 40-inch DOTs, but
Right.
it's been cool. I know that there is a hard pill to swallow coming soon. I was talking with I can't pronounce the guy's Catrini.
He keeps saying Curtini. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from. It's just like you calling Ayash or whatever the fuck you say. Ayusa. But I was talking with him about getting a set of stickies, and when I do go stickies, it's going to be $2,000 for the tires for a set of used stickies, and then another, $1,000 in axle shafts. But it is what it is. That's just the next step.
Yep.
Sorry for another tangent.
No, it's okay. But I mean, I'll tell you what, there's, as far as my Jeep goes, the only other thing that I would say is even close is just doing the 1 tons on my Cherokee. Other than that, putting a set of 39 reds on it, it's like there was probably no bigger transformation that I've ever done to any vehicle ever than put a set of reds on it.
Was it the set of reds or was it the set of tons? That was the bigger transition.
Yeah, as I was saying that, I was kind of trying to think, because it's it probably was the tons, and I mean it's sort of a catch-22, right? Because you can't have the reds without the tons. But
I would argue it's the tons, and the reason that I will continue to argue it was the tons under that rig, and that's coming from someone that was an observer on that rig, is in the time that I wheeled with you and knew you, watching the transition while you were on the Maxxis creepy crawlies was interesting. You really started to push the limits on the rig. Like,
sure.
I think it was you got the rig back from Dan with the cage, and then we went to Ma Bell. And for someone,
I remember the day you're talking about.
Yeah, for someone that I'd wheeled with you one time before, you never laid into limiter as much as you laid into limiter then.
I remember that day. There was this one spot, and it was just like, it was all greasy, and I was debating on bringing this up, but Mike said that he really liked those tires for a DOT tire, and I gotta say, I thought I had high expectations for those things, and I really did not like them. I really did not. But anyway, continue your story.
No, it was just one of those things though, where like I was watching you throughout the day. I think that was the first day Richie rode with me.
It wasn't the first day, but
no,
it was one early days.
I meant like to Ma Bell.
No, it wasn't the first time, but it was one of the first times.
Yeah. So you started the day off really relaxed, if you will, like you weren't banging limiter. And then by the time that we got to Diff Dragger, you were like comfortable, if you will.
Sure.
And I'm not going to say what happened afterwards, but, I think we did end up going all the way down to Zook. And
I'm not sure I even understood where the limits were at that point.
yeah. And I think that was a massive thing. And then
Oh God, is that the day? No, that was a different day. Was that the day that like I
that
ended up
was
like one wheel drive on the way out?
yes, that was the day that the drive
Oh
shafts
God,
left the chat.
I had repressed that memory. That was a bad day. That was not a good day.
That was a hilarious day and a incredibly insightful day for young minds.
Sure.
Because you can still break it after you put 1-tons under it. That was the
Yes.
biggest takeaway that I had from that, and then I melted a torque converter on the way home.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's nice too.
Yeah, I crushed the return line somehow at Ma Bell that day. And it melted my torque converter, so I bought Caleb's like 350,000 mile AW4 that had no reverse
Oh
and swapped
God.
that in. Good times.
Right.
I was
Right.
very smart back then.
I mean, you heard my story about taking like, there's probably days in my life where I had the leaf packs apart in my Cherokee like 3 times in the same day.
Yeah.
Because I thought that was an efficient way to do things. So yeah. No,
Yeah,
no
well,
judgment.
anyways.
We've all been there.
So then the next thing that comes to mind was the Roush trip. What was that? It was
Jesus.
Operation Enduring Realness 4
Yep.
or 5.
I don't know which number it was.
That was a fucking awesome trip.
That was a fun one. I remember that one.
That was the year I turned 18.
Yes, and we were drinking moonshine in the pavilion.
Oh God.
Oh boy, yeah, that was yeah. That sounds about right.
I turned 18 at Roush with you guys, Harry.
Wow.
You were involved in the corruption of young minds. Not so much you. I'm gonna blame Caleb more, but
Yeah, was it apple pie moonshine?
it was.
It was.
Yeah, we were into that for a little while.
Yeah. Funny story about that. I moved to Tennessee, and now I'm the jackass that provides the apple pie moonshine. But
Excellent.
I remember that because it was what you, DeNicola, was Ross there? I can't remember if Ross Davis was there, but I know that there was another one-ton rig.
No, he wasn't there. Was that the year Eric Miller came?
Yes, that is the year that Miller came. He drove the buggy up, if I remember right.
He sure did.
Yeah. So that's where, for our listeners, the story of Eric Miller stepping out of a buggy that he drove from, I think, Maryland comes from.
Yep.
That blew my mind watching this. Like, I barely talked to him because, like, I was 18 or 19 at the time, and like
He's Eric Miller.
Right.
Yeah. But I saw this dude get out of a full 2 chassis buggy like it was nothing with a Maryland tag on the back, and then go pay and just head into the woods. It was the weirdest thing that I have ever seen in my life, and one of the highlights of it.
Sounds pretty normal to me. Man gets out of rig, pays to go and drive, goes drive.
No, drives full-blown Ultra 4 car from Maryland to Roush.
Oh, okay, well that makes more sense.
Yeah, he was doing like he posted like a picture on Facebook on the way, like he had like some goggles on and like like the hood of his rain jacket like completely tightened around them while because he had no windshield. He's doing like 85 down the highway.
That's funny.
Yeah. And then wasn't that the car that he took to KOH that year and like placed?
To be honest with you, I can't keep track of all of his different cars. I keep up with KOH kind of at the time of KOH, and I don't follow it probably as closely as I should. Honestly, I wish I followed it a little more closely, but I don't know. I don't know which car that was.
Well, to tie back in though, I think that was the last trip that you made on the Maxis. And the next time that I saw you, you had the 39 Reds on it, and it was at
Yep.
Mobile. And to tie
I
all
don't.
of this, huh?
I don't know if I've ever been to Mobile since I had the Reds, but maybe you're right. Anyway,
Anyways, no, it was the first time that you had it because you still had the burb. And I think it was like a thrown together bullshit trip because I'm pretty sure Dan was there. And that purple Jeep was there. We sent the purple Jeep on 31's up
yes,
Gatekeeper.
yeah, I remember that trip too.
You were driving the same way that you were with the Maxis with the Reds. And I think that the tons are the biggest step, and then the stickies are the cherry on top.
So if I had the Suburban, I definitely didn't have the Reds. I think I must have had the creepies at that trip.
Maybe my memory's failing because we're going back like 10 years at this point.
And I'm like 85% confident, but I don't think I've ever been to Mobile since I had the red labels.
That might be the case. I might be wrong.
Is it the Halloween trip? Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah.
There's a picture of Caleb dressed up like a leprechaun while I'm driving up a ledge.
Yes.
That sounds right.
Anyways.
The only thing I have a little bit, that's sort of where you probably lost a little bit of visibility to it. So I think at the end of that year, so the following year we went to season opener for season opener at Field and Forest.
Oh, yep.
And I had the creepies and everything still, and I went there thinking that I was going to do okay, and I absolutely left that place with my tail between my legs. Like I was like questioning. I'm sure Bob is probably laughing whenever he hears this, but I was I was doing like some soul searching about like what I want out of wheeling on the drive home from that trip. Like it was a really, really big slap in the face because I was used to walking around Roush or Mobile or whatever and like just kind of like point and shoot for the most part. And that was absolutely not going to happen there, even on the black trails. And it was a wet weekend. It was just like everything was covered in grease. And that was like, no tire does really well like that. And those things were absolutely atrocious when they got wet. And,
so I don't mean to cut in here, but that our audience is not hearing is Graham laughing maniacally in the other room. I get to hear it.
The Discord cuts it off half the time. It's annoying. But yeah, that is really funny. That I completely understand that viewpoint. From Field and Forest, it's definitely an eye opener compared to a lot of other things in New England.
100%.
Yeah, it's wild.
100%. And so I didn't go back at all. I think I went back for fall crawl that year. But then other than that, I did the normal, I probably went to Mobile once or twice. I went to Roush a bunch of times. Because I still kept in touch with, and I'm still in touch with a lot of the guys from the Rochester Club, Finger Lakes 4x4. There's a really, really good group of guys out there. And so I would go, and we were like equidistant. I was like equidistant from them, or we were both equidistant from Roush. So like it was like 4 hours for them, a little over 4 hours for me. So I would just go down and hook up with them at Roush all the time. And so I kind of went back to that, and then I went back for fall crawl, signed up for a black, had much more realistic expectations, and ended up having a pretty good time. And that was, I think that was the same season that Dan had sold the Zyrox and got a set of red labels. And I was like, okay, this is kind of the way of the future. And I mean, again, we were not wheeling at Field and Forest that year, but I was just kind of like, yeah, my Cherokee doesn't. I don't even think it was registered at that point anymore. I was like, I can see that this is the way that things are going. So that year, I had over the winter, I bought the beadlocks and the 39s, and then I went back to Field and Forest, and then this is the thing that has me sort of like 50-50 on it. Instead of being like pissed off and leaving with like, my tail between my legs, questioning everything that I had done with my Jeep for 6 years up to that point, I was like, that was freaking awesome. I drove so much stuff that I like couldn't have even dreamed driving with the Creepies. It is at least as it's at least as big of a difference as going from stock axles to 1-tons. And again, the it's a catch-22 because you can't have the 1-tons with the stock axles, but truly transformative, man. Those things take a rig, as long as you have the drivetrain to put up with them. If you could slap those things on any rig and they are going to transform that rig. Yep. That's it.
Yeah,
I agree. We just built a buggy for the club, or finished building a buggy for the club president, me and another buddy of mine in our old shop space. And I mean, we put a set of reds. Luke, where did those come from? I don't know whose reds they were.
They came out of Long Island. I forget.
Okay, so we don't really know, but
I owned them.
Yeah, no, you didn't. So either way, I had these reds kicking around. I hadn't put them on my rig because I still like pretend to drive it on the road and use it like a normal car. So I had them kicking around. We were building this thing, and I was like, just take these. Take them for like, I forget what I charged them. It wasn't a lot. It was like $500 or something dumb. 300 maybe, like way less. They didn't have rims or anything. He had nice rims to put on them. And, I honestly wasn't sure how they were going to do. We went to...
Yeah, because you look at them and it's like, they're these like clapped out things. And you're like...
Yeah, they don't... And these ones are old too. Like these are...
They're rough.
They're not in the greatest shape, even for reds. They have tread though. So, like, that's... Which... tread, it doesn't mean anything on a red label, I know, but... Like, there's still a little bit of life left in them. I was just concerned that the compound was going to be fucked because they've definitely been sitting outside in the winter and the summer, all like just not great. But we brought that thing out for its shakedown, and I was behind. I watched him drive everything, and then I got behind it for a little bit, and it really does just like go over shit that, in my rig, which is not quite the same, but similar. It's still a Cherokee, right? Same size-ish tires, and I would not have that as easy of a time in going over some of that stuff. So I think it definitely is transformative depending on what you're going up. I mean, if you're Field and Forest, like that's a game changer move right there, is to go with the red labels. I agree.
Sure.
So the only thing that I'm going to jump in here with is I don't have stickies. I've literally never bolted a set of stickies onto my rig.
If you've never driven them, you don't have you really can't, not to like gatekeep you here, but like, how can you have an opinion on how transformative it is? I drove behind them once and I was like, holy shit. Like, I mean, we like to pat myself on the back and did a pretty good job building the rig, but like those tires carry some of the design on that thing 100%.
So I'm going to just jump in and say that's not exactly where I was going, but I'll accept the criticism here. For me, the biggest thing that I have done ever to the Cherokee isn't even the 1-tons. It would be the suspension. Like that, taking the time that I took in the suspension made it so that I am incredibly comfortable with the rig and can fully use the 1-tons.
Sure.
So I am interested to see what a set of stickies will do. But after watching Graham keep up with several rigs on 43 stickies down here, I don't know if stickies are as large of a thing as I thought they were going to be due to the fact that I am now in Tennessee.
I would totally buy that. I would totally buy that.
When it's sloppy, nobody's got any traction. When it's not sloppy, you have areas where it's muddy and areas where it's dry. Now, the sticky TSLs, whatever they're running, right? All the
the
cut to shit
43
stuff.
SXs.
They have no surface area on the tires. Like the razors that I have, it looks kind of like a better designed BFG desert tire, so it's got a lot of surface area. And you wear that thing down. I was having absolutely no issue following those tires, the new Mickeys with the really aggressive tread and the cut boggers and other things that people are running out there. Like, just because my surface area on the rocks when it's dry, well, I just had more of it. So I was having no issue doing exactly what they were doing for the most part. Granted, as soon as you get into a mud puddle and you need the horsepower and the
dig,
the
if you
dig
will.
to actually move you forward, then you've got a problem because my tires are basically round and they don't dig and they don't grab mud, so you're just spinning.
And that's why I say that, like, or that's why I was saying that I think on my rig in my circumstances,
just
the
Etna cut the Nittos and call it a day. You'll be fine.
probably. I think the suspension was a larger upgrade down here than the stickies are, but I'm really sad because I moved out of New England. Excuse me, right when I finished the suspension build. So I really wish that I
Your
could
rig
go
would be a
back.
great crawler just because of how the suspension works. Is a great crawler.
It's a shame that the driver sucks.
He doesn't know how to crawl.
Yeah, he learned at the Nickel Dick and Harry School of OER how to drive up Crawl Daddy.
Right.
Oh man, that was
Bump Daddy?
Bump Daddy.
Daddy.
So for those that aren't familiar, if you type in the SIS Off-Road YouTube channel, there is a video of Harry's run at the Operation Enduring Realness that we were talking about. And it is one of the few high-quality videos on that channel. Oh God, what was that? That's Heavy Metal Designs.
Will Gentile.
Yep, Will. That was one of the first times he actually brought studio equipment out, if I remember right, to
Is it?
an
Is it?
OER.
Okay, so it actually is like really good quality then.
Yeah, dude. Like
I haven't watched it in a while.
It was shot in 1080,
Oh wow.
if I remember right, or 720.
What year was this?
This was 2014 because it was the year I graduated high school.
Okay.
What have I guessed? 14 or 15, something like that.
Yep, it was 14. Richie and myself had just graduated high school.
Hell yeah.
It was like our first big adult decision was to go out of state with a bunch of strangers.
100%. That's a big deal.
Fun is. Yeah.
It's wild though. So you're going to F&F more and more, right?
Yep.
And all of that with the Cherokee.
So just to pop in, just because you did mention cool trips, and I couldn't get through this interview without bringing it up. So, me, and Hannah, and Mike Abadi from the Rochester crew, and Mark Wing with the Rochester crew. Mike, you probably don't even really know. I mean, he's been at Roush a few times or whatever. Mark Wing has that tan, like Willys looking. It looks like a Willys, but it's like a full tube chassis. I don't know if you guys have ever seen. It's like there's probably dozens and dozens of pictures of my rig and that rig out on the trails together. So it's a really cool rig. It's like got all the Willys proportions, but it's got built.
But it's a tube buggy.
It looks like if you were like 50 feet away and you saw it, you'd be like, oh wow, that's a Willys, and then you walk up and you realize that it's like everything.
Funny story about that. I actually met that guy at Ma Bell.
No, not. It wouldn't have been Mark.
No?
I don't think Mark's ever. No, he's out. He's from way out in New York. I think the only places he's wheeled out here are probably Field and Forest, and he went to Badlands once.
Because we were out at Ma Bell, and we met up with a guy. This is back when I still had the 44 and 8 1/4 under my rig. But but the guy had a tan Willys buggy on 39 Reds where it was just like you described, full tube chassis, everything, but with a Willys body transplanted onto it.
So this was like I think it might the grill might technically be Willys, but literally every other thing on this is he built it.
Okay. So different guy, but very similar rig because it's literally a tan Willys buggy.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
he cut the tub, or this dude cut the tub and welded it into the side skirts.
Sure. Makes sense. If you were going to
Sorry.
build something like that, that's the way to do it for sure. I mean, it's kind of how I did my Cherokee at some point. But so the four of us, Mike has like a 48-foot enclosed trailer. So he brought Mark's Willys thing and his Ultra 4 buggy out to and then we met up with them in like Denver, and we went out to Sand Hollow in 2017. And that was just and so we drove cross country, and that was an absolutely amazing trip. It's like I took like 2.5 weeks off of work. It's 3 days driving to get there, 3 days driving to get home. And Sand Hollow absolutely blew my mind. And it's like we weren't even really doing the hard stuff. I mean, I had my Cherokee on the Reds and everything, but it's just that place is just absolutely insane. So we were there for, I want to say 2 or 3 days, maybe 4 days. And it's just like you can just explore and explore and explore and explore forever. And at Sand Hollow, they have trails, but like at least when I was out there, if you want to just drive up something, you can just drive up it. Like there really isn't, because it's all just rock anyway. You know, it's like a little tumbleweed here and there or whatever, but like it's just rock. Everything is just that sandstone. And so if you see something and you want to try to drive it, just go for it. There's no issues with doing that. And it's just like there's just absolutely nuts out there. Like you're just driving next to like cliffs, like 1,000-foot drop cliffs. Like you're gonna.
That gives me anxiety.
Oh, it gave me plenty of anxiety too. But I'll tell you what, man, like there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. If you ever have the opportunity, or if you have any interest in doing it, I very, very strongly encourage you to make that happen at some point in your life. Even if you don't bring a rig out or whatever. I mean, I don't know if you guys have like been out west like that.
Yeah, I
haven't.
Okay, all right. So you have some idea then.
Yeah, I
I
spent
don't.
some time in El Paso.
Okay. Yep.
So when I was out in El Paso, sorry listeners, breaking the fourth wall here. I know you've heard this story a million times. But we were out in this like 4.3 powered YJ or 4.2 powered YJ, whatever it was, some stupid Chevy carburetor set up on or TBI set up on there. And we were walking up stuff that if you were to try and drive in New England,
Yep.
your rig, like your current buggy, would struggle. And it was just mind blowing because we're on like clapped out 33 Toyos.
Right.
And it's just hooking and going.
Right. Yeah, it's especially at Sand Hollow. It's different because everything is so steep, and everything is really sticky. But like it's like you have to like kind of have like the balls to commit to some of this stuff, like going up it or going down it.
Yeah, it's more of a mental battle than it is like your rig doing it.
Right. And you got to make sure that you aren't about to blow something up because everything has traction. Like you just have to be a little bit more aware of everything and a little bit more willing to, like, it's like in New England, you're like, all right, sending it basically means, like I'm just gonna, put my foot to the floor and then hopefully kind of like do some sort of steering that gets me up this muddy wall. Whereas like out there, it's like, I know I'm gonna have traction the whole time, but the only way I'm making it up this is by flooring it or whatever. And it's a whole different thing when like every hop your rig takes, it's gonna come down hard and have traction. And it's it's a whole different way of driving. And I certainly did not master it by any means while I was out there, but it's just very different.
Yeah, it's something else for sure. And like as you said in New England, it's you pick a gear and you pick a direction to set your wheel, and you kind of like have to commit to that and then steer as a result.
Yes.
There, it's you have
Everything
to almost
right.
be planned where the rig is going to bounce.
You have to be a lot more calculated for sure.
Yeah, and then down here, it's like you can choose that you're going to kind of steer that way, but the rig might actually go the opposite direction, even though you're cut full passenger. It's actually going to go driver, and you need to adjust to that now and
Right.
make sure you don't lose the fucking momentum.
Right. It's like you have to like ram your rig into something 2 or 3 times to understand what it's even going to do before you can even try to make a calculation of what your intent is on the obstacle.
Yeah. And then when you have the intent, your intent really doesn't matter because it's like the initial input. You have
Right.
to be
Yeah, you're
really
right.
quick to like catch your rig.
Right.
I don't know if you know who they are, but the Prater brothers, notably Brad and Bart. I mean, well, I guess that's the Prater brothers, but they're very good at that. They run LS rigs with like 100.
There is a third one.
There is
They're
a
in New
third
England?
Oh yes, there is,
No,
but
they're in
nobody.
the South.
His
They're
sister or
down
something,
here.
right?
They're out here in New England?
No,
No,
they're out
down
of
south.
they're out
Oh.
of like where I am near AOP in Windrock.
Gotcha.
But they're very good at catching themselves while they are like in the middle of bumping it most of the time. And it's a totally different driving style than what you would see in New England. It's I don't know, it's something else.
Yeah. It's every place is a little different, right? I feel like all the different quadrants. I don't know. I don't know anything about the Pacific Northwest, but I imagine that's probably, from what it looks, pretty sloppy compared to the rest of the West Coast. So
I feel
probably
like the
similar.
Pacific Northwest is probably like wheeling the South, to be honest. Except it rains more there.
And less clay, so I don't know.
I feel like it'd be more Northeast style than anything, because you're right. Clay is a totally different style of dirt than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
clay is a
packs
mean
tires up.
motherfucker.
And then if we get like a rock specialist in here, they'd say we're all completely wrong and that the way that the Earth's core works and how it came up with the crust, it's like some magical fucking stone from the Wizard of Oz. So we might be completely wrong.
Who knows?
Is it asbestos?
Either way, it does just all asbestos rocks.
Yeah, or last time you were our geologist, you told us there were asbestos rocks. So
There is.
I don't know.
Asbestos comes from fucking rocks.
I feel like the Pacific Northwest is pretty much, it's on a similar latitude to New England. I feel like out there it looks maybe not identical, but it looks similar to what we're wheeling in New England.
I think they're
It's also a lot higher elevation too.
Yeah, absolutely. We're probably barely above sea level in New Hampshire or whatever.
Yeah, I think that the rocks and just general obstacles seem slightly different. I mean, I don't know what the topography of the place looks like, if it's hillier or not, but it's close. It's definitely close. I'd say they're probably comparable. I agree.
Yeah. So just to finish up that thing about the trip. So then on the way back from Sand Hollow, we stopped at Moab, and I think we were actually in Moab for longer. But that was really cool too. There's a lot of cool trails in Moab, and we ran area BFE. I think the year or two after we ran out there, it was like closed for like 3 or 4 years or however long, and I think it's back open now, but it's like kind of a little more commercialized than it was. Like when we went there, it was like there's like a little bucket for like donations and stuff like that, and I mean it's in Moab, but I think it's privately owned, whereas like everything else is like BLM land, and you can kind of just do your thing.
Yep.
But yeah, that was really cool. My Jeep wheeled for 10 days straight out there, and that was something that was really, really cool. And I definitely like felt very proud, like driving home, like, and like when you're like, you're like 2 days into driving somewhere to go wheel, you're like, fuck, I hope nothing really bad happens. Cause what the fuck am I going to do? And just like you get those weird electrical things that take you 2 weeks to fix. It's like, what do you do when that happens out and you're on like once in a lifetime trip or whatever? Like.
Then you're just
So
sitting
I
there
was
and
just
having a mediocre time trying to fix a problem that you're just kicking yourself about.
Right. So I had like an issue with like my front drive shaft, and that I fixed like in half an hour on the trail or whatever. And but that was it. Yeah, 10 days straight, and in a freaking clapped out Cherokee. That was 2017, so it wasn't quite as beat at that point as it is now, but it was well on its way at that point. So that was really cool, and I'd love to go back. I don't know when I would do that at this point. I mean, I got a 4-month-old here, and that's just such a huge time commitment. So it'll probably be years if I ever go back. But I am so glad that I have that memory. That's something I'm really proud of doing.
Yeah, that's definitely a bucket list spot for me,
whatever you gotta.
It's-
I would definitely encourage anybody that wants to do it, even if it's just once. It's just like there's that, I can't remember which trail it is, but the one that's like there's this thing you climb, and it's like in the background is the Colorado River that's like cut through all the rocks or whatever.
Yeah,
like,
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's just like when you're there, you're like, the pictures always look cool, but then when you're like sitting there and you're like on your rig looking out at the Colorado, you're just like, wow, this is really amazing. So
what trail is that at Harlan that's similar to that? There's I think it's Trail 7. You end up with a overview of all of what the hell is the name of that county? But essentially you get to look out over like a good 10 different coal mines, and you can see almost to the state line from that one overlook there. It's very picturesque in a similar manner, and you can't really describe it unless you're there.
right.
How about the one that everybody takes a picture of during the Jeep event? So that picture, I'd have to.
Where you drive out on the cliff?
Yeah.
I did not. We didn't. I don't think we went on that trail. I'm not sure which the one that was. And frankly, that would have probably freaked me out a little bit anyway.
Yeah, what if the rock breaks when your Jeep's
Dude,
on it?
well, I mean, it's like that's the obvious question, and it's like if it was, you would think if it was going to break, it probably would have broken by now. But I still, every time I see somebody on that, I'm like, what if that fucking rock breaks, man? Like, that's,
I mean, who's
like,
gonna?
What's
It can only take so many Jeeps, right? There's no
right, the fatigue strength of that whatever rock it is. Did you guys see the video of Lauren? I think it was Lauren Healy, like spotting his daughter in that Bronco thing out on that during Easter Jeep Safari this year?
I don't think
Like
so.
he like kept, she was like, they kept going back and forth between her and the driver's seat, and him like, like waving at her to keep moving, and she was like way out there, and she was totally freaked out, and I was like, man,
when you're in the rig
feel
too,
that.
like you can't see that last couple feet in front of you. You're like, am I gonna drive off the edge? I imagine that's scary.
Well, and I'm just thinking more like my kid. It's bad enough watching someone else do something really, really sketchy like that, right? Like it's almost worse when you're watching someone else do it than when you're doing it. And then it's your like 16-year-old daughter. I'm just like, wow,
I'm not ready
I think
for
probably,
that.
yeah.
Ain't no way. But what's that big there's like a big arch that people drive on, and it's literally like barely wider than a whole entire rig. It's like the Devil's Spine or something like that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I'm good on that
yes.
one too.
Yeah.
Dude, that is like the most fucked up thing.
Isn't that like the access trail to
I want to
Moab or
say,
something?
Hold on, let me
I
look
want to
it up.
say that was closed when we were there.
Oh,
I don't think we drove up that. We drove up Hell's Revenge, which is like, it's cool, but like, there's like people driving up it in their like RAV4s and shit. Like it's really not that hard.
that's that
more
like
companies.
V-notchy thing, right?
No.
Yeah.
Wait,
And then
is
there's-
this Lion's Back is the one that I'm thinking of?
I
That is
think that sounds right.
fucking, I mean, this one's pretty wide, but still, like, you're literally like, there's a cliff to your left, cliff to your right, maybe enough room to turn a rig around. I think this is the one that I was thinking of. What's this?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wait,
Lion's
I
Back.
don't think we did that one. And then there's there's one, and I'm blanking on the name of it now, but like, Escalator. It's called Escalator. So like you go up and then it flattens out and goes up and it flattens out, and it does that like 2 or 3 times or whatever. And it's like there's like sort of like rounded rock formation on either side. Everything's just smooth, But it's like if you don't take the right line, you get like all fucked up, and like you're picking up a tire and doing all this weird stuff. And like sure enough, I am like, there's a picture of me with like my driver front tire like 6 feet off the ground while it's already like pointed at the sky. And I'm like, yep, this is me. Like I'm the guy that like came in and like just totally botched the line on this and is screwing it up. But it's but just all like good stuff it's like it's just surreal. I mean, not even just for wheeling stuff, but just like when you spend so much time looking at pictures of something or seeing something on TV or watching videos or whatever for like years and years, and then it's like all of a sudden you're there. It's just like it's such an amazing feeling. So yeah, that was definitely like, as I look back on the last 10 plus years that I've really been into wheeling, that is very, that's obviously a highlight for me. So go do it. Go to Utah. It's totally worth it.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Pretty much, I've been trying to convince the guys to do the Transcontinental Trail. I think that could be a really fun time. Like literally going just dirt roads all the way from, I believe it's Maryland, all the way out to Utah. Like, that'd be such a good time. Yeah, and do it like in shit boxes too, so that way it's like a
so it's
actual
extra
adventure.
Miserable.
Oh yeah, no good suspension. Like
so that's like, that was like the original dirt every day. Like back, I used to, I don't know if you guys ever did like magazines and stuff, because you're like at least 10 years younger than me. But like I used to get like JP Magazine and like Peterson's 4-wheel drive, and like I think Katrini probably said exactly all of this already, but like I just had like a stack of those like next to the toilet instead of my iPhone. So like that's like what I would do, and I'd be like a month later, oh sweet, another couple weeks of material here. So and like that's what like Fred and Rick Payway they'd find some clapped out rig, or maybe it's a clapped out rig that they had already, some Willys thing or whatever, and they would pick where they were starting, pick where they were ending up, and they'd figure out how to get there without ever driving on pavement. And they would just like bring some tools and bring some fuel and stop in here places here and there, stop at some random desert guy's house who had a bunch of Jeep parts, and like swap the transmission or some crazy shit, like that was like the original thing that like Dirt Every Day started from. Like it was just like a magazine column, and they would just write about these adventures that they took. And so cool. But like that's exactly like what you're talking about. And to be honest, it looks like an insane amount of fun. It's kind of like roadkill meets like light wheeling kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like the wheeling isn't strenuous, but the vehicle isn't ideal, and
exactly
you're not on a smooth road, so bad things are prone to happen, and you're gonna have to resolve them.
Right.
See, I love the sound of that. That just sounds like a terrible time, and I want every part of it. There's a lot of beer, burgers, and complaining, and I'm fucking in. Like, that sounds great.
So another thing, so I discovered Rick Payway has a YouTube channel 2 or 3 years ago, and he's in this club where these guys just have like Willys, and they're on like 32-inch or like smaller, just like those like weird military
the old school
tires, and like they don't have enough gear reduction, and they don't have enough power, and they've got like that one, like it looks like a tractor roll protection system roll bar behind them, if they even have that. And these guys just go run like what I would say are like blue or black trails like out west, and they're just like banging along, and these things are just hopping around on leaf springs. And I was like, if I were going to like decide that I was gonna kind of just like dial way back for whatever reason on the four-wheeling stuff, sell the buggy, sell the truck, blah 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 blah, for whatever reason I had to dial back a lot, I think that's probably what I would do. And I don't know how much of that there is around here. New England's just such a different place than out there. Like you can't just, it's so hard to just hop on the road and then just go, like, oh, cool, there's some rocks over there. That's, BLM land. Let's just go drive around over there. Whatever. But
that's one of the biggest issues there, right? Like down here, we've got like Harlan is 3.5 hours from my house. Good Evening 7 hours. AOP's an hour and a half, and Windrock is an hour and a half. You don't get that up there. Like you want to go to a big park, Roush is the only big park. You want
No,
to go
it's
to a
not
hard
right.
You want to go to a hard park? Well, you better have a camping spot at the Field and Forest Recreation Area because that is the spot that makes the men and the boys separate.
And I, you know, that's at some point after a couple of years wheeling my Jeep there and Badlands and some of the other like day trip kind of properties around. I realized I was like, this is the bulk of what we have around here. Like this is really it. Like there's, I mean, I haven't been to like Brook Ridge and maybe some of the other properties, and it's like you go to like some of these other places, not Field and Forest so much, but even like Badlands, like you can go there and you can have some fun on 33s or 35s or whatever. But and this might be a blind spot for me because I'm so far down the other path, but it doesn't seem like there's not like there's the concentration of like wheelable for Jeeps on 35's property in New England
So,
that there is for the buggies on 40s and sticky tires.
so this is one of those really sad jump backs, if you will. One of my favorite weekends that I ever did was I think Graham, Colin, and myself, and I know Cody cooked breakfast that weekend. But we went to Harris, and then
cooked
we
my
Oh
went.
yeah,
skin.
Harris was a cool place. It's
Yeah,
Yeah,
shame
we
what had
went.
happened to it, but great property
Boy,
for 35s.
Shame about
we
my
did.
hand too.
Was I on
That's
one
your own
ton
damn fault.
then? I
Yeah.
can't remember. I was
Oh
on one
yeah.
ton then?
Yeah, because you popped the
Okay.
beat on the 40 and then you
Yeah,
didn't wheel the rest of the
you're
day.
right.
Or
You're
you
right.
popped or something like that. Remember it like stunted.
Yeah, it stunted my morning, but it didn't kill the weekend.
He was out the rest of the day, I think. He just didn't do the wall of death.
Yep. Anyways, besides that, we went out and we hit Battlegrounds, which is a NEA property, and I believe you're part of the Slayers, right?
Yep.
Okay, so then you get to hit all the NEA properties. We hit that, and then we went over to Harris, and we camped at Harris. And that was a killer weekend because there was
Yeah.
everyone there from like Greenleaf with his at that point and at this point almost Ultra 4 Cherokee,
Pretty
but
much,
like
yeah.
just
Right.
not like quite legal for the specs. And then
There's a lot of
everyone
buggy
down
guys
to
there. I
35s.
forget why they showed up.
It was just that someone, or I think it was Rich at that time, had planned that event and like
Gotcha.
just made it happen. I think Pezza was even there.
There were a lot of people there that day.
Pezza was there the week before or something like that. I
Alright,
don't.
So then we were there 2 weeks in a row. Holy shit!
Yeah, that was.
I miss that shit.
That was the best summer ever. Literally, I think that's 2018,
Dude.
2019. So good.
2019 summer was the best summer we ever had.
Yeah, like you're talking about 2012.
Yep. Yeah, I was
2019
just
for
gonna
us
say it
was.
sounds like my 2012. Like I was
Yep.
just out every
much
single
wheeling.
moment that I
Yeah.
could.
Yeah.
I remember that season because I was putting a scratch in the fucking center console and I stopped when I hit 20
That's
for
awesome.
every
For
wheeling trip.
for
And
every
it started
yeah,
that
that's
season.
solid.
You're
That's
like
solid.
a psycho in a jail scratching his fingernails off of a wall. I've been here for
Yeah,
31
It feels like
days.
that. Sometimes it feels like that.
Dude, it was so nuts. That was the season that like I don't know if you ever saw the meme of the junkyard motor swap with the guy from Aliens. It's me, I'm back, motherfucker.
No, I haven't seen that one.
Not quite the wording, but close enough.
Whatever. No, that was the year of the weekend motor swaps because I blew two
So many
4-liters
dudes.
that year.
Oh, come on. How did you do that?
He just
Oh,
loves
no,
blowing
the
dudes. I
third
don't know.
one
Like,
was the most interesting, and that was
Yeah.
at the end of that season.
Yep. Hit a
And
big one.
how? I don't know, dude. I have terrible luck.
He was buying, the most primo motors, though.
Yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
sure. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right.
These were high quality rebuilds.
If by
The
high
most
quality rebuilds you mean
that-
not caring about mileage and caring that they were less than 20 miles away and they had a way to load it in the truck, yes. I think my favorite one would be the current 4-liter that is in my rig, where I showed up. I asked the guy if he was ready to load it. He said, yep. Dropped the tailgate. I threw him $120 and it was in my truck bed and then in the Jeep. So yeah, that should explain how I went through 3 4-liters in a season.
Interesting. That's an accomplishment. Those things are pretty tough.
I actually managed to split the crank, wipe the camshaft, and send the number 4 rod to God in one motor in one weekend.
That is pretty good. That's pretty good.
And it drove itself to the shop until it literally couldn't drive anymore.
That's pretty good. That's Mike Abadi. It was a couple of years ago now, but we were at Roush, and he had well, I think he still has it. This ZJ buggy that like somebody had like 80% done, and he just like kind of bought it and for short money and just put into it whatever it needed to get it on the trail. And he was just like driving away, like no big deal, just like a good 2,500 RPM, just kind of like heading down the green trail. And I watched him, and all of a sudden it was just like bang, bang, poof, poof, like oil, like smoke flying out of the bottom, like smoke out of the wheel wells and everything. And it just gave up. I think I can't even remember what happened, but there was like chunks of cam in the engine bay, and just like, and it was like running on like 3 cylinders somehow, and it looked like the crank had somehow broken, but it was just like, what? So I don't know. Things just happen sometimes, but
yeah, so you're not going to know this road, but Richie will and Cody will. I was on 222 on my way home after Cody and his ex, we were hanging out at Richie's place. And so I'm just bombing through the gears, and all of a sudden I start, like, it was ticking, and I'm like, oh, cool, I just stuck a lifter. I'll pull the head off this thing, swap it, whatever, no big deal. So I'm driving home, and it's not climbing this hill in 4th, so I slam my manual into 3rd and fucking push the pedal all the way to the bottom, and
So
it's still not climbing.
Is this the hit? So wait, is this a road that you drive on regularly?
Yes.
And so yeah, go ahead.
And so I'm like, all right, well, what the fuck, shitbag? Throw
That
it
is
in
a killer hill too, by
second.
the way. It's not
And like
It is a good size hill.
in 2nd gear, it's like still dying on me, and I'm like, all right, well, fuck you, I'm not stopping on this hill. And so like I get to the top of the hill, and it's barely moving in 2nd, so I put it into 1st, and I'm like, all right, well, something is really wrong here. I call for assistance. I get to Cody brings my trailer because it was connected to his truck because he towed his Jeep to Richie's place. So we load the Jeep up, whatever. We get back to the shop. I drain the oil pan, and I start hearing thuds as the
Nice.
oil is draining. And I'm like, well, that's got to be good. So we start pulling the motor. We get the motor out. We drop the oil pan off, and I find the fucking crank is cracked with the number 4 piston. And the 4, 5, and 6 rod bearings are all fucking destroyed and like falling out.
you didn't hear that? It didn't sound wrong.
Yeah, there's
Oh,
a
it
pretty short
sounded-
amount of time. That's a lot of damage for a pretty short amount of time.
Oh,
So just to clarify the elephant in the room, because Richie just texted me, he goes, X? Yes, me and Caitlin broke up. For everybody listening.
I didn't know that.
sorry
I was
about
like,
that.
Well, it's just so casual because it's something sorry, I just had to point that out in case anybody else didn't know.
Hey, I wasn't trying to dig too far into that. That's
you're
y'all's
good, brother.
business, and I ain't getting involved. But so Harry, the thing with it was ticking at the start of the weekend after I had swapped that 4-liter in to make that trip.
Ugh.
And then the fucked up part was that I had a wheeling trip 2 weeks from then, and that's when the $120 motor that is still in it went in.
Dude, it's a roll of the dice. You never know what you're gonna get when you get stuff like that. But It's also
Well-
kind of the beauty of it is that you can get a motor for $120. You know, you just got to be willing to put in the time if it doesn't work out.
So to make that even more glorious, there's a guy by us who goes by the name of Logan. Super good dude. Ended up meeting him right after Graham came down because Graham's down here for like a month of wheeling, basically. We're supercharging my engine. I bought a M90 and the adapter plate and charge pipes. So we are going to be swapping the oil pump out on it and swapping some other stuff around. And then hooking it to HB tuners and pulling a bunch of timing and throwing 6 pounds at a 350,000 mile 4-liter.
It's probably the best kind of 4-liter to throw boost at.
It's the strongest. It's shown that it can last.
Hey, it's lived longer than any 4-liter ever has in that Jeep.
And to clarify, you're not gapping the rings at all?
I think
What?
they've gapped themselves at this point.
Buddy, old pal. Instead of gapping the rings, I'm going to throw water meth at it.
Oh, you're a psycho.
So you can hook HP tuners up to a 4-liter ECM these days?
Mhm.
Yes, you can.
Apparently.
But to actually tie the system together, now this is not me talking. This is like everything Logan has told me.
Yeah.
In order to actually make it work, you have to connect a old school Honda map sensor to it, and then
Okay.
write your maps off of that, because otherwise the 4-liter computer shits the bed.
It's probably not. It's just not used to seeing boost. I would imagine anything
Exactly.
more than atmospheric pressure and vacuum, right? So
Due to the fact that you're putting a 2-bar map in, you're
Yeah.
able to tweak the fuel on the dyno, hopefully,
interesting.
so that it will be safe.
Because that was always the thing that granted, I was never anything I dug that far into, but I always heard that like even when you add forced induction or whatever to a 4-liter, it's like super hard to tune them because the ECMs are just like these like ancient bricks that you just can't do anything with. But
Yep. But
that's cool.
Nerds have found a way around it. So
Right on.
if you reduce it to the point where essentially you multiply your fuel value by 2 because you're getting 50% of the map reading,
Sure.
it somehow works out up until about 9 psi, and I'm throwing 6 psi and water meth at it.
I'm a fan.
I have no clue what I'm doing.
But
But, like,
fortunately, 4-liters are cheap, so you know.
yeah, whatever. If I break it, there's another one sitting at Logan's shop.
Yep.
Um,
Well, I'll be interested to hear how that goes. That sounds cool.
it's
I
gonna
always
be
thought about putting a
stupid.
stroker or something in my G. Obviously, I'm way past that without ever doing anything like that. But
Yeah, well, you make more horsepower in your buggy now than we probably ever will.
well, it's a 1.8T. It's a 180 horsepower motor.
All right, well,
So
I
no.
suppose we should probably dive into that.
I was gonna say.
So
Yeah,
why
so-
not
All right,
VR
so
sticks?
let's go back. So about 2018 or so, I started really wheeling with more people that had their stuff catered to places like Field and Forest. So like Eugene Whitford is definitely a big one. Ricky Barrett with his, at that point he had his TJ on 43s and tons and everything. Kyle Haining had a tiny little he still has a tiny little Toyota buggy on 37 Reds. Handful of other people that I'm gonna forget or whatever, but like these guys had rigs that were like set up to wheel this place, and I kind of, after a couple of years I was like, okay, my Jeep is not really cutting it anymore. I mean, it gets it done, but it's like I'm like the guy that's sort of like setting the pace of everyone else, and nobody ever, nobody ever gave me crap for it or anything like that. Like I think that's a really good group of guys, but I also didn't want to be that guy anymore, and it had, at that point it had been a good 8 years of like real hard wheeling, like at least a dozen like hard weekends a year every year with that rig, plus the Utah trip and all that stuff. And I was just like, no matter what I do to this thing, it's never gonna be like, I know I want a 3,000-pound rear steer buggy, and it doesn't matter how much I cut off this thing and do this and do that, it's never going to be a 3,000-pound rear steer buggy. So, but I also knew I knew it wasn't gonna happen overnight. So I was just like, I'm done doing anything other than what this rig needs to just keep wheeling every weekend. And that was basically, at that point, that was basically like keep patching up cracks in the unibody, to be honest.
What was your final straw?
I don't know if it was an exact moment. I think it was just like a feeling that just kind of grew a little bit every time I was out. Like, it's just like, I'm trying to drive up something, and like the sheet metal is so caved in on the sides, but then like it has to kind of like go back to, like, it's like an hourglass almost, but like it's at the end, like there's all these pinch seams and stuff, and it still has to go back to where it has to end up where it started at some point. And it's just like stuff like that I would just get caught up on. Like at one point there's like this tree on Easy Street, and like I was driving along, and like Caleb will never, I'll never forget this either, but like I was driving along in Field and Forest, and I was driving, and like I kept hitting the gas, and like my front tires were like coming off the ground, and I was had my harnesses on, and I couldn't see what I was doing. I was like, what the hell's going on? And Caleb like walked over, and I was like, what am I stuck on? And he was like, there's a tree inside your Jeep. And I was like, what do you mean? And so like there was like a tree that was dead, but it was also kind of like an important tree that kept people from like just completely missing all of the hard stuff. Like you can just like bypass all the hard stuff if this tree's not there. And unfortunately it's completely gone now. But at that point it was probably like, I don't know, 6-7 feet off the ground. And I had managed to get that tree in the pocket of my Cherokee where the driver rear window, or like all the way like that rear quarter window would have been, and it like hooked inside my roof. So every time I was driving, like it was like the rear tires would just like get traction, and like the front tires would just lift off the ground. And I was like, what the hell's going on? And so it's just like after like a few years of that, I was just like, this isn't cutting it anymore. And to be honest with you, probably the biggest thing is visibility. I got so tired of not being able to see anything, that like I could see I could kind of see what was in front of my driver front tire, and I could see what was in front of my driver rear tire, and that was it. Otherwise I could see like outside of a 10-foot radius around my Cherokee. And when you're wheeling stuff like that's really technical, or really just like it's really just big rocks and stuff like that, you really got to be able to see what everything is doing. And in a Cherokee, you just can't see anything. You cannot see anything.
So
That's a good point.
The reason that I brought that up is, right, like I'm trying to buy a house. From earlier in the podcast, obviously, I'm trying to change career fields,
Yep.
and all of that stuff. And every time that I look at the sad carcass that is my Cherokee, the only thing I can feel is sentimental about it.
Right.
So I end up glossing over all of its faults. And there is a guy who, his name's Sam Turker. He goes by Naked and Afraid on Instagram. Absolute salt of the earth. One of the best people I have
Biggest
ever met.
pussies. Sorry, what?
Stankiest pussy for
There we
sure.
go.
It claps when he walks. But like I helped with the design a little bit on he calls it the Wendigo chassis, and
The
like
what?
the Wendigo
Wendigo.
chassis.
Okay.
Is that
It's,
public knowledge yet?
Yeah.
yeah,
Is
well,
it?
at
Has he
this
released
point,
it?
whatever.
Well,
I
now it
don't care.
is.
It's public knowledge now. It is a trail bouncer chassis, and
Yep.
I was going to build one of those, but like I just can't stomach building a buggy at this point. So like all the faults on the Cherokee, I sit there and I'm like, I polish up and I'm like, you're not that bad, whatever. So that's why I was just curious as to what it was that finally broke you, because you had been wheeling a internal cage XJ for so fucking long that I
Right.
figured it had to be one thing.
It really wasn't. It was I think that's a very reasonable thing to think as an outsider looking in for you. To me, it was just a culmination of I'm trying to keep up with these guys, and I see, and actually I think I don't claim to be God's gift to driving by any means at all, but I was out driving that rig. Like I knew exactly how to do everything that rig could do, and there was just I was just like banging my head against the ceiling on what that
So
rig was able to do.
that is a perfect point. I'm still paying penance, if you will, to the rig. Um,
Sure, sure.
my rig will comfortably outdrive me.
Yeah, right. Right. So I think that might actually be the thing, Luke, is that when you feel like you're getting in the driver's seat and you're like, I know what this rig needs to do, and it's this rig just can't do it. That is
Yes.
actually probably going to be the moment where you're like, I got to do something else. If you still feel like, damn, this thing is awesome, and I still need to figure out how to tame it, you still got time. That's my feeling.
Dude, it is absolutely nuts. I have hit a point where I am comfortable with that rig hanging tire on the front or rear 3 foot. The body can be off camber like a son of a bitch. Graham always makes fun of me for the fact that after I linked it, I got the geometry. I tried to get too close to the sun, if you will, for getting everything perfect.
Sure.
So my upper links essentially sit 4.5 inches apart, and as a result of that, the body it likes to throw itself around, but I
Okay.
have 11.5 inches of separation, and
Yep.
then I've got 8 inches of separation at the frame. So when I put my foot in it, it actually squats the whole Jeep. So I am so comfortable at this point with the rig that like if I get scared, I know that I can just throttle into it and the rig will
Sure.
like
Sure.
push into itself.
So right. Right.
And I haven't hit a point yet where I feel like the rig is the limiting factor. I am the limiting factor in that rig.
So my advice then is just enjoy that. Just enjoy that.
Yeah.
Because it's a fun process. It's a fun process learning and mastering your rig and the terrain that you're driving on. That is the whole thing that makes wheeling fun, at least for me. I mean,
Oh, it's wild.
so just you'll know when it's time. But if you're still having fun, I mean, that's really the biggest thing is if you're still having fun, then I don't think you're ready. If you're like, I know where I want to be and I can't do it with this rig, then it's time to start
So
looking at something else. And there's going to be other things that impact that, right? Like if you're trying to buy a house, you're just going to kind of put that on the back burner. You're going to be like, you know what, this isn't where I'm putting my money right now. And that can impact it too. Like when you look at it and you're like, yeah, I'm not going where I want to go, but this isn't where I'm putting my resources right now. That
yeah.
can kind of impact it too.
So I'm sure you know who Timmy Craig is.
Mark?
Mark Craig?
Or
Timmy
Okay,
Clark or Mark
I
Craig?
think you mixed
Timmy
two
Clark.
people together.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
Clark?
Yeah,
Mike
no,
Craig and Timmy
definitely.
Clark. They really are like one and the same, but
Well, they show up together, so
I
it's Timmy
think
Clark.
either of them would
Um,
probably take offense to that. I don't know them that well, but I think neither one of them would like the idea that you're comparing them to each other.
Timmy-
well, who if they listen, then they'll have to tell us.
Timmy can take offense to that and is more than welcome to make up for his shitty showing in the first podcast episode because that wasn't Timmy. That was like the ghost of Timmy. And
Yeah,
Mike doesn't
okay.
want to come on a podcast because Mike has got like sand in his vagina or something. So
Right.
it's Timmy Craig.
Okay. Yes.
Either
No.
way.
It's Tim Clark.
Tim Clark. Either way.
Yes.
So
I know Tim Clark not super well. Love him. Great guy.
essentially, though, Timmy helped me build the suspension on both ends of the rig,
Okay.
and now the ends of the rig are literally failing before I hit my driving, like the point where I'm scared of driving, if you will, or I feel like the rig is, or I am out driving the rig. The track bar is literally pulling the front end around. Excuse me. And then in the rear, there's really nothing wrong with it except for the fact that the unibody is so twisted that when I built it, the cage was square and now it's crushing the body into one of
Yep.
the tubes.
Yep.
And I'm like,
Yep.
how do you even fucking do that?
Right.
Shitbox,
Right.
why?
Right. They're just the Cherokee is a really hard platform to build a hardcore crawl around unless you do what Josh and like Rob Lacoste have done, like where you basically have almost nothing left. Like
Yes.
then
And
it's like, okay, but like if it's something that you want to bash on for years and years and you're really bashing on it with tons and 40s, it's a really tough platform.
so that gets to the point where it gets really interesting in my case. So I bought a 241 from Sam, right? 241 OR.
Yep.
That
4 to 1.
bolts right up to my AW or AX15, not AW4.
Oh, you got a stick? Yeah, you totally need
Yeah.
that. What do
I
you
don't
have
know.
now? What do you have
You
now?
really
He had a
don't.
231.
It's fine. I
It was
made it
horrible.
work for years.
It
Dude,
did
that
not
is-
work.
That is awful.
It worked
know.
amazing.
I don't believe you.
You cannot believe me.
There's a reason he
But-
couldn't drive. It's because he had zero control over the thing. Because it was clutch or no clutch, and
Yeah,
feathering
it's
is
like
out of the question for him.
minimum 4 to 1 if you got a stick, and
Yeah.
that's probably not even really enough, but it's
Yeah,
enough to make
whatever.
it work. Okay.
No, it's definitely enough. I've got
You're
like
right. It's enough.
5-ish. It's
more-
almost too much. Like I'm like winding the thing out in trying to go just trail cruise in any gear. It's a little. It could get annoying. Fifth gear is nice, but
So
Here's nice. That's
to get back
great.
to it though. Right. So I got the 4 to 1. I have the AX15. I'm gonna be probably bringing another AX15 down from New England, so I have a spare.
No, that'll be a good setup.
And then the 4-liter with the M90. It's like, all right, well, cool. Now that fucking is all solid-ish, kind of maybe, but the rest of the rig is like the actual unibody fails me before the rig fails me. And the suspension it's so wild of a difference for me. Like I was talking, I had Mike up till probably
Timmy
1:30
or
in the
Mike?
morning.
Just clarifying.
Huh?
Timmy or Mike?
Katrini,
Mike
I'm guessing.
Katrini.
Okay, just
Yeah,
double
I
checking.
had
double
Katrini
check.
up, and we were talking about how to tune my coilovers because, like, I sent him all the numbers and everything, and we went so far in depth into it that, essentially, Mike can correct me where I'm wrong, but it was bring the dual rate adjusters down. If that doesn't do enough, go from the 140 to a 175 in the rear. And then if that's still not enough, fuck with the flutter stack. But like everything else on the rig is so well tuned that it's there. You know what I mean?
Then
And
just
that's
keep
why
then just keep going. Just keep going.
exactly.
yeah. But
No need
that's
to
why
fuck
I
with it.
like the buggy stuff is so cool. But at the same time, I want to just cut the nose and the tail off of my Jeep.
But what's
and-
But
cooler?
you can still do that. You can still do
Yeah.
that if you want to, and you keep all that good stuff that you have going.
Exactly. And that's why like I ended up turning away, and it's like, man, it's cheaper for me to just use the bender I have and all that other stuff and keep going with, what is admittedly at this point an error, but a very cool error.
That's It's real. That's really funny that you say that, because it's like,
I
Cherokees are such awesome vehicles. They really are. I mean, just like stock ones. Like I remember like when Hannah got hers, and I was just driving around stock, and I was like, man, this thing just drives so nice. Like it was like, what a great vehicle. The only downside is that they just suck gas, right? Like they were born in a time when gas, they were made in a time when gas was like $1 a gallon or whatever. So it's
dude,
like,
they're terrible vehicles, but they're amazing.
I don't think they're terrible vehicles. I really don't.
So the reason I say it is a terrible vehicle is because it is so well put together for what it is.
That's what I'm
when
saying.
you start to look at it in context of the way we use it,
Right.
it falls apart.
They're not.
Like,
They really aren't a good candidate for this. They really aren't,
No.
to be honest with you. And we're all a group of people that that have either done it or are doing it anyway. But they
Yes.
aren't. They aren't.
And so to tie Cody and Richie, who have been the silent passengers this episode, back in.
I've been trying.
I know. But in Cody's case, I built his front suspension. And I'm sorry, Cody, I'm going to take credit for that because it's wild what your rig will do.
Yeah, I was going to say, you definitely have all the credit in that.
But like, I took a Clayton kit and I improved the link spacing and all of that. And I sat down with the calculator and like played with it. And then I was like, all right, fine, this is what we're doing. And his rig on 35s, I shit you not, was absolutely leaving my rig on 40s in the dust when I was running Patagonias.
Yeah.
Like his rig was more capable than mine was because of my shitty tire choice. But it was wild to watch because it was like a well-tuned machine. And it still is a well-tuned machine. He just needs to actually finish like a couple minor details. And Richie's rig, we were trying to build on a budget. So we did JK rear upper control arms as lowers. Is that correct, Kish?
Yes. Yeah. The rear uppers work for the front lowers.
And then I built a set of custom uppers for it to keep the 4-link. And then we modified a double shear track bar for it. And it's wild what a Cherokee will do in those circumstances because, like, my rig is XYZ capable. Graham's rig is a step within the same footprint, if you will. And then you have Cody, who's following right behind. And Kish is chasing his fucking heels. But the second that you start putting 1-tons and 40s in there, the amount of work to upkeep the rig for what the rig will do just goes through the fucking roof.
That's the thing. It's not a question of what it will do, it's how long it will reliably do that.
Yeah.
I swap my track bar. It's like comical at this point. Once a year. I have to
Track
cut it off and redo it every single year.
Yeah, because it's ripping off the unibody, right?
There's no way I can brace that thing and
right. There's nothing you can do. There's really nothing you can do.
That whole rail flexes, like I've plated the inside, the outside, and it's still ripping it all apart. I was looking at it the other day when we were working on my winch, and like half the welds are starting to crack and just a bunch of other stuff. And it's been I've had it with the setup that it's got on it now for a year, and it's got a lot more tubing, a lot more bracing on it. And it's just still not hanging like that whole. I'm wishing I cut those front end rails off because it just wasn't. They're not holding up.
I mean, right up until the very end, I was getting under my Jeep to do stuff, and I'd be like, oh, I don't remember seeing that crack before. Like seriously, like, and it's fully tubed. Like, I mean, there's not. I mean, yeah, maybe I could have done a little bit more, but like, it's a losing battle at some point. It is.
Yeah, it's just something again, it's the downside to working with a Cherokee. One of the
right, and I don't know. I mean, can you get them cheap anymore, like a stock one?
No, not real.
Yeah,
not as
I didn't
easy
think so.
as you
So
used
now
to
they've
be
sort of
able to.
lost that end of it too.
There's not a lot that are under $1,000 anymore.
Yeah, and it used
Well,
to
you have
just
to
be
look
like,
for 'em,
it's like no big deal to find one for $500. Like,
Correct. Yeah.
and so now they've sort of lost that end of it a little bit too. It's like it used to just be a throwaway. Like, all right, I'll just take all this stuff off, junk the chassis, and move it to the next one, and maybe I'll do a little bit better job with this one. But now enough of us have done that there's the supply has been greatly diminished of them, and the ones that are survivors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everybody now they're like now it's a classic, right? It's got the same sort of status.
It's something.
Yeah,
something,
we
I
don't
guess.
think it's to us it's not, but like to a lot of non-car people it's like, oh, look at this old Jeep SUV thing that's, you know, it's
One
like
of the
shitty gas mileage, but drive pretty okay and are reliable and, you know,
So I mean, that was
relatively
one of the
cheap.
right. That one, and I think Petrini said that in his podcast too. Was that like the early Bronco was that when like he was getting into it,
Yep.
yeah, and you know,
and
one of the
I've heard
things-
other people make that comparison too.
One
I
of
mean,
the
look at
things-
Broncos now though. Those early Broncos, I mean,
Exactly.
it blows my mind how much they go for because they're,
Oh,
right.
they're
wild.
pieces of shit. I hate them.
Right. But
Uh,
they're not there aren't like millions of them still out there,
No,
No, there
yeah.
aren't.
and that's where we're getting with XJs at this point.
And one of the things that has stuck with me was I was out wheeling with this guy Dylan. Graham knows who I'm talking about because he's wheeled with him. But we were out and he was looking over my rig and he's like, you know, this thing's kind of crude, but like you are wheeling some kid's dream and
Oh,
absolutely
right.
destroying it. And I was like, I don't know how to take that because at the same time, I'm still living out my dream. You know,
100%.
when
I don't. Yeah.
I
What did he?
met,
I don't really know what he meant by that.
well, what I think what he meant by that is that like I have a 3 and 4 linked XJ on coilovers in the rear that's like been meticulously put together, even though it doesn't quite look like it.
Okay.
It doesn't.
And what was that, Graham?
Nothing.
Oh no. No,
You'll have to
you
listen
repeat
to
it.
the episode.
It really doesn't look like it was meticulously put together, but like some of that has been baked into the design. When I did my cage, I was looking back at the old Ultra 4 buggies, like from the first couple of races, and building off of that. And that was like kind of the design. That's why my tube's all like super square and kind of blocky, but like you look at the nodes and you can't fault any of it. And like I sleeved the first 2 foot of my Halo with, you know, it's 120 and 120 pounded together to make a 240 wall tube for all of the supported areas and whatnot.
Mhm.
The suspension's been gone through and shit. And like, so long story short though, it's a classic and it is something that I had always wanted to build. And it's the way I've always wanted to build one of these rigs just to see how far it will go. But I'm the last of the group of people that's going to be doing that.
Yeah. I agree.
There is, I can't think of anything. The WJ,
I mean, it's
maybe?
like JKs are too cheap at this point to not start there, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and like
And
if
and
you
I
want
and
cheaper-
listen, this is a Cherokee guy saying this, but they're a better place to start.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but if
Just
you
because
want
they have the
cheaper,
frame.
what else do you have? The WJ?
Yeah,
Like that's it.
sure. I mean, yeah,
Nobody
you could do
wants
that if you
to-
wanted to, but what?
That's a
But
lot of
why?
work.
But
That-
you
that-
already know where this path goes. You
The
know,
barrier
like,
to entry for anything that isn't a JK, from a Jeep perspective, is pretty high, right? You're not going to find a lot of aftermarket stuff that's actually going to perform for a WJ. Like,
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
honest.
I mean, but
I mean, there's like
you're
a reason the ZJs and WJ when people build them, they're cool, but it's usually not somebody's
on, I
first
gotta-
rig that they're like
I gotta
learned
pump
how
the
to
brakes
fab
though.
on.
It's not the first rig you learned how to fab on, but like the principles are all still the same. But I think that what we are talking about right now is what is leading to the current buggy craze that is currently like sweeping across the wheeling scene. There
Well,
aren't
I mean,
any
I think
more.
there's a lot of things contributing to that.
Yes.
Yeah, but there aren't any more cheap rigs. Like you can't go out and buy a Toyota to make into a shipbox crawler like you could in 2018, 2017, where
No,
like a rot box one you could pick up for 4 or 5. You
no.
can't do that
and
anymore.
part of that is, I mean, that the market on literally everything has just been turned upside down in the last 3 years, right? So it's like it's hard to
wild.
compare anything right now. Everything is more expensive right now.
And like I think a fair price for my rig as it sits now after Sam got done with the tube work would be 15.5. And that's a really expensive price for a Cherokee.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
How much
don't
did you
tell
just
me
say?
15.5.
Yeah, I mean, like that's what I would expect from a full 1-ton Cherokee with a 3-link front, 4-link rear, and like 40-inch tires. That's what I would assume most are around.
You're gonna save so much money just doing that.
$15,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and like if I were to
Doesn't
post,
mean it'll sell, but that's reasonable.
Yeah, that's with
That's
having probably
like
what
they're saving
17,
themselves
18.
time.
Yeah,
yeah, because like to go out and buy a base model Cherokee that is comparable to the $300 start of my project, you're talking $5,000 now to get into the same
Yeah.
body condition that I started with in 2018.
Right. Yep. And knowing what you know now, why would you start there again?
I wouldn't. I would just go and buy fucking $5,000 worth of tube because Lord knows that's gonna go further.
It will. It's just you got to be able to put the time into it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's so much.
But like, I am thankful for the fact that I stand on the shoulders of giants and under the shade of trees that I have not planted.
Luke said, "I'm a motherfucking god. Check me out. I'm sitting on these
No,
shoulders,
I
dog."
don't mean like that. I mean like there are people out there like Mike that I can go and call, or like Timmy that I can go and call. And I know that if I call Mike Cretrini, I'm gonna keep butchering his name.
You almost
guy
had
will-
it right.
I think you got it right that time.
You get
He will pick up the phone and he'll be like, "Oh, cool, you're doing this? Yeah, so do you have like a time in the next or 3 hours later that we can sit down on a Discord call? You can give me all your numbers and we can figure this out." And that guy will come out and he'll spit out something that like will produce a 4-link that will outperform what I consider to be my current gold standard.
Sure.
And all of that information is so readily available now that I would never build another Cherokee. But
Sure.
I love my Cherokee.
And I think that's not a bad place to be.
So like now I suppose we should probably dive into your buggy, because your buggy to me looks like a hybrid of the old Roush comp buggies meets a side of the F&F buggy. Now I have another stupid question before we dive all the way into this.
Hit me.
Did running Humble Pie in your Cherokee help to inspire this?
No, it accelerated it.
Accelerated, inspired.
It
Close
was
enough.
okay. So, 2017 was the first year I ran Humble Pie, which I think it was 2017. I didn't run Humble Pie the first year Bob ever did it. I ran it the second year, and I think at that point, I was in that sort of holding pattern that I told you about, where I was like, I know that any major modification that I do to this is not going to get it enough closer to where I want it to be that it's worth doing. So I'm just keeping it as is. So we qualified and it was miserable and it was super wet and we were up until like, it took us like 20 hours of wheeling to get the qualifier. And then I totally botched the bounty run by just driving like an idiot. But I think I left that Humble Pie like, no, okay, whatever. Yeah, like that was good. I learned some lessons. I won't drive like that next time. And then a couple humble pies later, I had already started building my buggy at that point. And it was already, actually, I think it was after that year. I got under to do, I was at this rental house at this one point. I had a 2-car garage, and I like brought my Jeep in to just do like some winter maintenance to get it out of the way. Cause I wanted to get going on that Comanche project. And but I was like, I gotta make sure the Jeep is ready to wheel for the year. So it was like January, and I was just like, all right, do this, do that. I know like like the battery box was falling off of it, so I beefed that up, and just some other. It's like the typical like winter Cherokee stuff that you have to do because like, oh, this is falling off because everything is sheet metal, and so I was yeah, right. Like you guys all know, it's like, that thing's made out of sheet metal, so it's falling off now.
I'm talking with Sam right now about how to build a battery box that's going to mount to my roll cage because I am so sick of dealing with a factory battery box.
Yeah, I just like welded a piece of like I made this like pocket of 1/4-inch steel that like braced down to the unibody, and that held it in. And I was like it's like I cut out where the factory battery box was that was rotted away, and then just welded in a piece of 1/4-inch steel with a gusset, and then just bolted it back in there.
Yeah,
That's a good point. I never really thought about that because I moved mine, but before that I had an okay mount. But like the factory battery boxes on those things just get hammered.
Everything in it is mounted. Everything is sheet metal. Literally everything is sheet metal. And so you can make a whole winter out of repairing stuff that's gone wrong because everything is sheet metal, and that's basically what I did every winter. So, but then I got under there and I realized that my stiffener on the passenger side had like completely rotted away from the rest of the unibody. And I was like, I just can't. I can't leave it like that. Like I know I can't leave it like that. And so this was an upstate New York Jeep for its entire life until it came to Connecticut. So it's like, and I was an idiot. I didn't know anything about New Hampshire oil. I didn't know that you should be, hosing things down. Like, and so I just let the salt sit on it and it just rotted away.
New Hampshire oil?
New Hampshire oil? You never heard of New Hampshire oil?
No, what the fuck is that?
It's fluid film.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
okay. I assume that's what it was.
Same thing as fluid film. So now everything that I care about, I absolutely douche with New Hampshire oil because I don't drive new stuff. I drive old stuff because money and and the rust is at this point. If you're driving anything that's been built within the last 20 years, the thing that's going to kill it more than anything is rust. So, but anyway, I won't go too far down that path. But so I was just looking at it and I was like, I am so tired of laying underneath this thing, welding rusty metal back to rusty metal. And I think at that point I was like, all right, I need to spend some time. Maybe that was kind of the point, Luke. But I'd already known that that's where things were headed for a long time before that. Maybe that was the point where I was just like, okay, this is like the writing's on the wall. It's really time for me to do this. I was overdue for something that had some tube and wasn't a big 5,000-pound Cherokee brick thing for a while.
So that right there, the last thing you said is one of the final nails in my Cherokee's coffin. I'm not saying that rig is dead, and it is far from dead.
Doesn't sound like it. It sounds like it's still doing exactly what you need it to do.
But when it finally dies,
it runs.
Yeah,
it runs. It has the steering wheel.
When it finally
the
dies,
joke is he's had fuel pump problems. He had a moto built cell that just kept eating pumps, and so we'd get out on the trail, it would just blow up, or the pump would drop, and it would just mess his weekend up.
God.
Yeah, so like I drove out to Harlan. That happened there. I drove out to multiple different wheeling trips. Like for me, Good Evening Ranch is 8 hours or so.
That's in Virginia, West Virginia.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
they did. The We Rock guys are doing a thing there.
Yep.
Right.
In like 2 weekends.
Yeah.
Yep. I suppose that this would be as good of a time as any to give you your invite. You are formally invited to the Web Wheelers Ball, which is the first weekend of September at Good Evening Ranch.
We need like confetti or something to pop at his house when you say that, because you amped it up. Yeah, you amped it up like you are officially invited. Like,
Hey, well, you guys know how I got him on the podcast, right? I did the whole shitty we're trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty thing.
Yes, which totally went over my head, and I was like, God damn it.
That's funny. That's funny.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
You're welcome to come. We've hosted 4 of these events. Last year we packed
Hosted
out
is a
Roush.
strong word, but we're there. It's not very organized, but that's how it should be.
That's all right.
There is no organization.
The only organization is, hey, we're doing this weekend. People should come
Show up,
because
yeah.
it's cool.
Yeah.
Well, technically there is organization. I guess if you want to camp with people, just to drop Eddie's name, say, hey, I want to park near Eddie. He's parking his camper somewhere. That'd be the only organization that I've even remotely heard of.
You can get cabins too. You can like rent a cabin and all that fun stuff. So.
Yeah, the cabins make that property. But it's similar to how F&F is, where like they actually have nice primitive camping, but they also have cabins as an aside.
Sure.
But like they have a really nice shower house and stuff. It's great. And then the property is wild. And being from New England, you don't get to experience southern night wheeling like you do there. It's just another animal.
No, I think we've done a pretty good job of turning Bob and Liza off to night wheeling at this point.
I
Yeah.
heard a rumor that the Trail Slayers were involved in that, but
We don't want to assume.
I can think of a certain instance that I think really turned everyone off that Trail Slayers weren't into, but I'm not gonna go there.
Maybe
So,
we'll have to
that's-
bug Bob about that one.
yeah.
Go
we
ahead.
will.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm
we'll see.
I'm not gonna comment.
But anyways, you're more than welcome to come down.
So,
Anyone
do
that
you like
wanna
set it up
bring-
on Facebook or something?
Yeah, there's an
there's an
event.
event.
Yeah,
do an
send me
invite.
an invite. Send me an invite. I'll check it out.
I know that a bunch of the Southeast boys are going to be going there. Overtime might be making an appearance.
No, he's
some of-
not. He's going to the burnout thing. He's a big burnout guy now. He uses his Jeep for
Apparently.
burnouts and not wheeling, I guess. Oh no, he was at Windrock or something recently, I guess.
He
I don't
said that he was going to show up at that event, so fuck him if he's not going to.
Well,
You
it
know,
does.
I'll
It's
have
not
to
his fault.
choose
It
your
lines
off.
up with another thing.
Yeah, I mean, like when you start partying with Cletus McFarlane, I guess like you might get a little bit of a pass, but whatever. I know like Jason Ramsey's going to be there.
Is he?
I don't know.
He said
I
he
haven't heard
was.
yay or nay. Well,
I
his
thought he was
decision
selling his Jeep.
is so his decision is to be made as if he's going to Field and Forest with us at the beginning of
Oh, that's
October,
right. Yeah,
or
yeah.
if he's coming to Good Evening Ranch. He has not decided yet between the two.
Gotcha.
And then
Anyways,
what
we-
was it?
We've been
Anyways,
going for like a little over 2 hours. Do we want to cover more of this, or do we want to hear about the buggy that we've talked about and haven't really touched on at all?
probably the buggy.
Give us like a quick rundown before Luke interjects and we go on a massive tangent again somewhere. Like, I don't think I've even seen a picture of this buggy. Like,
It's right in the
give
general
me a
chat.
picture.
Just look.
Sure.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll see a picture of it, but give us the rundown.
So, I had always been. So it's a transaxle buggy. Are you guys familiar with the concept?
No.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I got a mixed answer. So I'll dive in a little bit. So
Give us the info as
Um,
if it were dumb, because some of the listeners might not know.
Yeah, it's no
Um,
no way are we dumb.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I couldn't be that dumb.
So you take a front wheel drive car.
Yep.
You turn the engine from being transverse to longitudinal. You weld the diff in the transaxle, and then bam, you have a transfer case.
Oh, so you know what's fucking really cool is ever since I watched that Dirt Everyday episode where they did that in like an Isuzu or whatever.
They did
I'm
it with
all-
like a RAV4, which I don't totally understand. It's a little bit
Yes.
different. with
I saw that
And
one.
they put it like in the passenger seat, right?
I don't actually remember.
Oh,
To,
you're gonna
to
have
be
to-
honest with you, I thought they took a. I would have to go back and watch that. I know what episode you're talking about, but I don't remember the details of it.
I'm pretty confident that they did.
Yeah. So okay, that is probably one of the coolest things that I've always really wanted to dive into, but never wanted to take the chance. Why
Yeah,
not just
well, so you're talking to the idiot that decided to take a chance on it.
why not just get the like you can get the kits to run it to a an XJ transfer case transmission. Why not do something like that? Like, what prompted you to think that the Volkswagen tranny would be any better?
All right, so and this was something that I put a lot of thought into. So, the reason that the main reason that I went with it was weight and space. So the thing that the transaxle setup gets you, especially in the, well, I guess it's either front or rear engine configuration, is I don't have to put a transfer case under my seats. So that saves me like a good 6 or 8 inches of either my belly being lower or my roof being higher, or some combination of those two things. It basically, like, it really, like, I think is now with the 42s, my buggy probably has about the same belly that my XJ did, and like just way lower center of gravity.
Yeah.
So it feels low, but it's got like a 20-inch belly, 21 inches, something like that.
Damn.
Underneath the belly.
Wow.
So it feels really good, especially in those off camper situations. And to be honest with you, I kind of dove into it. There's a whole Facebook group, as you can imagine, about, transaxle buggies and stuff on Facebook. And there was this guy, John Kennedy, who's he's actually in British Columbia, up in Vancouver. And he has a really cool, like just really basic buggy. And I saw it and I was just like, damn, this thing is perfect. Because budget is absolutely a thing for me. It's not the budget that I had 15 years ago, but it's not an unlimited budget, I can tell you that.
Mhm.
So
yeah, well, that's going to happen with any reasonable, responsible
of course. So my drivetrain came out of a Jetta that was $500, and then I sent the wiring harness and the computer and everything off to some guy, and he did everything that needed to for $800, and that was basically all. That's basically all I have into my drivetrain. And so I was, before I kind of even realized what I had, I thought I had a 4-speed automatic, and I was like, oh, everybody says this thing's a piece of junk. The ratios aren't that great, blah, 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 blah. And then I actually went out in the garage and I got the wire brush and the brake clean out and wiped off the tag on the transmission. And it's actually a 5-speed automatic, which is it's like some Japanese transmission, not like some horrible Volkswagen automatic, because I don't know, Volkswagen seems to know how to do a lot of things really well, but not automatics. So
they don't know how to do transmissions well. If they were an American company, they would be Dodge.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's like they know how to make a really cool engine, and then they just they just completely fall apart at the power transmission part of it. So it's a Jatco 506E automatic transmission. So it's a 5-speed. It's the Tiptronic transmission.
Yep.
So and it's actually because I was in my head, because I'm just worried about everything, and especially being an anxious person, but also wanting to do something that no one else has done before. That it's those two things don't jive well together.
They're antithetical.
They do not work together. It makes my life very hard sometimes.
You said it was a Tiptronic, but what year did it come out of?
Oh, it came out of an 03 Jetta.
So that would be Mark V. I didn't know that those.
No, that's a Mark IV. It was a
Mark IVs? I thought they were done at 01.
No, Mark IVs went up to 05, 06. It's a weird thing. My daily driver is an 06 Golf, but it totally has the Mark IV body and everything. It was like a split year. I don't know. It's weird German shit.
What the fuck?
Yeah, so it's all kinds of weird stuff. But anyway, so I found out it had a 5-speed, and so I was totally going down this path of this 4-speed's piece of junk. It's going to be a pain to figure out how to control because no one does anything with it because it's a piece of junk. And I was like, maybe I should swap in the old school hydraulic 3-speed automatics that people. So I did some research and I found out that the center, the housing that has all the clutches and all that stuff is the same in the Volkswagen transaxles between like the rear wheel drive stuff that was in like the Beetles and the Vanagons and all that kind of stuff. And then they basically just adapted that to a front wheel drive housing for like the Jettas and the Golfs and whatever, you know, all that stuff in the 80s. It's like all interchangeable. It's just like, did you mount it rear engine or did you put it in front wheel drive? So I was like, all right, maybe I should start looking into this. This transmission's a piece of shit. But then it's like, so with a 4-speed transmission, you get a lower first gear because you can get away with it because you have an overdrive. But when you got a 3-speed transmission, you still have to balance all these ratios, right? So you don't get as low of a first gear so that you can get a higher third gear and then the diff ratio. You know, so you have to balance all these things, right? Mm-hmm. So I was looking at it and I was like, all right, the difference between the 3-speed and 4-speed, maybe it's not huge. Maybe I'd be better off doing this. So then I went out with the brake clean and I realized that I had the 5-speed auto. And then I looked into that. And it has 2 overdrives, which I don't know if I've ever been into overdrive with it, to be honest with you, but it has a super, super low first gear. And it's like my crawl ratio in first gear with it's like a 5-something to 1 first gear. Maybe it's 4-something to 1, but then the diff ratio is 4-something. So so here's the thing that a lot of people miss about the transaxle setup, and it took me a little while to get, is that so in a normal transmission, just rear wheel drive setup, right? So you go engine, transmission, and then rear diff ratio, and then out to the wheels, right? So in a front wheel drive car, you're still doing all of the gear reduction, but you're doing it in one case. So my gear, so that diff reduction, so in a front wheel drive car, it goes engine into transmission, your 3 to 5 speeds, whatever you have, then a diff ratio, which is 3 or 4 to 1, whatever it is, and then out to your wheels, out to your half shafts, to your front wheel drive. So that 3 to 4 reduction, that's my low ratio. So
that makes perfect sense to me.
You have people think like, how can you have enough gear reduction? It's like, well, no, because my low range, I'm permanently in low range in the car. Yes. But I don't care. I don't care about that
because what it's for.
This is if it ever goes out west, I will be ecstatic, and I don't think it ever will. It's probably going to stay in New England its entire life. So so now I have like a 4 to something to 1 first gear, a 4 to something in the diff, which is basically my low range, plus it's an automatic with a torque converter, and then I'm going out to 538 gears. So I have it's like a 90 to 1 crawl ratio in first gear. And so it's actually like it crawls really, really good. It crawls really well. And actually, I think it might be better with the 42s, to be honest. I think it might have almost been a little bit too deep with the 39s. I think it's almost better with the 42s. So anyway, so you get the engine in, you mount it, and it's in there. And the part of the reason that I went with Volkswagen is, I mean, aftermarket support. The 1.8T is like this ubiquitous, like people swap them into like every generation of Volkswagen there ever was.
VR6,
dune buggies, all kinds of stuff. Like you could do anything you want with them, and they're
should have went Audi VR6.
Right? Yeah. I mean, I didn't want to quite go that far. It's like the
it'd have been so cool though. It'd have been so sick.
Yeah, but then I got to fit a V6, and dude, this 4-cylinder barely fits the capacity that I
it looks like it barely fits.
It's actually I forget the exact degree, but funny enough, it's almost an inline
there's
6.
Two heads. There's 2 heads, right? It's like barely a V6.
Yeah.
So, sure, yes, maybe that would have been cool, but it's 180 horsepower, and it makes like 173 pound-feet at like 1700 RPM. So like, when you're crawling, like it's got all the torque, but then like when you want to like whack like 5,000 or 6,000 RPMs, it's still got some go behind it, and it really has been a good engine. I think still kind of dialing it in. I feel like
there's a lot of room for expansion with it, right? Like you can play with your turbo size.
There is, and to be honest, at this point, I feel like peak horsepower is not what limits me. It's how fast I can get there. like my buddy Reed has got this. He's got an LT. I think it's an LS1, like a true LS1, not like a 5.3. Like a Corvette motor or whatever. I'm not a GM motor guy, so I don't know. Hopefully I'm not pissing anybody off here, but like it's like 375 horse, like stock, and like I watch him and I'm like, bump it, and he like hits the gas and all 4 reds are lit up, and I'm like, damn, like that thing rips, and like my motor just won't do that. But like, look at the size of my buggy. Like I can't fit a V8 and a V8 drivetrain and all that in there. Like it's just not what it's meant for. So I'm kind of like, and I'm totally in the stage now where I'm like looking for those like little, like the buggy's built, it's running, it's driving, I love it. And now I'm kind of like looking for those little gains, like I know I could have made it up that if I could have like hit it with a little bit more wheel speed. And so I'm looking at stuff like like a looser torque converter, so I can kind of the stock converter probably stalls at like 1800 or 2000 or something, and so like I can't 2-foot it and get any kind of RPM out of it. Like it just wants to push through the brakes. Whereas if I had little bit of a looser converter, I could 2-foot it a little bit to like bring it up to like 2000, 2200 or something like that, and then kind of like dump it at that point. Yep. And try to like kind of pop over some stuff. Like I'm kind of into like, that's something I'm looking at. Or like tuning. A lot of tuners are saying you can get a lot of you can bring on the rate at which the power comes on a lot faster with a little bit better of a tune. So I'm kind of into that stage with it a little bit right now, but it really works really, really well. And but so part of the reason that I went with the Volkswagen drivetrain was, one, the 1.8T, like we were just talking about, endless options for that to basically make, 400 or 500 horsepower. People are doing that. It's like I get on Facebook, and it's like every other day there's somebody who's like, what do I have to do to make 400 horsepower out of a 1.8T? And there's like 50 comments with people just saying this is what you have to do. It's like not a thing. I don't think I'm ever going to try to put 400 horsepower through that drivetrain. But
you have a watt box?
A what?
Does it have 2-step?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's an automatic.
Yeah, you can still do it. There's a way to do it, but you have to like, I forget how you do it. There's pretty much you lock the torque converter, trick it into thinking it's in neutral, and
honestly, the thing that would really make it badass, and I would skip all of that, is if I could figure out how to do a trans brake on it. That would be the perfect thing. But
very funny story. We were just talking about trans brakes right before the episode.
Yeah, we were talking about using a trans brake instead of clutch or neutral dropping it, right?
Yeah, right, 100%.
Like that would probably be a little better for the transmission.
I think it would be significantly better.
Yeah.
You would.
There we go.
Because you've already got all that line pressure and everything built up. It's like the transmission is like dying to go, and then you just let it go. Whereas like with a neutral drop, you've got like no line pressure. You've got like
slamming
it like hanging out there, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh fuck.
That's
meanwhile,
which AW4s can handle for like a couple dozen times, but I don't. Yeah. Most transmissions are not going to tolerate that more than a handful of times.
Graham and myself are just sitting over here like, you silly pores.
I don't know. Whenever I'm on a ledge, I've got to like feather it. The only way, because I don't have 3 feet. I can't put my foot on the brake and the clutch and the gas at the same time. So I'm like, if I'm on a ledge and I'm revving up, it's literally just clutch. Like my clutch is my brake.
Right.
And then I let it go. Right. But I'm just cooking the thing. I've never had an issue with one. Like I'm just using the factory ones. I've never found one pulled apart and been like, oh shit, I fucked that clutch up. Usually it's oil gets in them, and that's what fucks them up, not me burning them out for other reasons.
Frankly, the 4 liters are such a good motor for just a general wheeling rig. They really are.
Mm-hmm.
No, they aren't. They blow up.
Yes, they are. No, they're fine.
Well, when you buy $120 ones or randomly, but they really are. They're a really solid motor for just a get it done wheeling rig. Man, I almost wanted to build a buggy around one, to be honest with you, because I'm like,
it's just such a heavy motor for a buggy,
and that's why I didn't do it. That's why I didn't do it. But I'm like, man, I just beat the balls off this thing. It makes 190 horsepower. Like it does. It's got grunt off the line. Like it really does almost everything that you need it to do. It's not going to make 400 horsepower or whatever, but It really does. It does what it needs
Gets
to
the
do.
job done, and it's mostly reliable.
Yes, right. Well, if you're in the habit of bouncing off the rim limiter and then replacing the engine that blew up with $120 engines, I mean, you got to kind of be willing to take what you get. But
Hey, I don't
it's
take
not
any
a
offense
criticism.
to
It's
that.
not a criticism. I'm just saying you got to be a little bit willing to kind of
Notice I
understand.
said I don't take any offense to that.
Okay, right.
Um, no, I know what I am, and I've accepted what I am for what I am. But I really want to dive into the meat and potatoes on the rig. How
Sure.
did you set up your suspension? And you
So
said it was
let
rear
me I'm
steer.
gonna back up. So one thing that really made me settle on the Volkswagen drivetrain outside of all the 1.8T stuff is Volkswagen. So if you guys ever worked on front wheel drive cars, a lot of cars, it's like there's like a little snap ring, kind of like an external snap ring, and it just kind of like pops into the transmission, and it can just kind of like pop in and pop out like when you're servicing it or whatever. The Volkswagen actually has a flange that bolts into their transaxle. So there's like a socket head cap screw with like just the right, it's not like something you buy at the hardware store, but it's a really the spider gears in the transaxle are threaded for this cap screw, and so when you bolt the flange on, it threads right in, and you align the threads up, and it's perfectly captured. So it's a really good setup to mount a drive shaft yoke to, where like that guy John Kennedy that I was talking about with his neon buggy, he had to come up with this weird kind of like clamped, captured setup with it almost looked like a disc brake rotor for his front output, because otherwise, like when the drive shaft droops, it would just pull the output out of the transaxle. So when Volkswagens are firmly secured, and they're basically one of the only brands I found that build their transaxles that way, you can just bolt a drive shaft right to it, and there's no issues with it. So I had a guy machine out a couple 8.8 Ford 8.8 pinion flanges to like set perfectly into the Volkswagen drive flanges that the CV shafts would bolt to, and then once you get an 8.8 flange on there, you can adapt it to whatever you want it to at that point, which for me is 1310 stuff, because I really don't want to break any transaxle parts. I would much rather break 1310 drive shaft parts than anything inside my transaxle, and so far at this point that's worked out really well for me. So that was the first thing, I guess, outside of just the sort of endless path that you could go down with a 1.8T to make power and make it standalone, blah, 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 blah. The Volkswagen transaxle also kind of drew me into going down that path. So, and the other thing is, with the transaxle, especially with a front seater, is that you do, I guess it's really not specific to a front seater, but when you can just have such a lower center of gravity without having the chassis be so much bigger. Like if I've even thought about, because I'm just, constantly trying to anticipate something that could go wrong. That's just the way my brain works. But like, what if I wanted to adapt it to some sort of like, more traditional drivetrain with an engine and a transfer case and all that? And I can't see how I could do it without like totally reworking everything. But thank God it's worked so far. I sent everything that I made as far as like yokes and flanges and everything, and I bought a set of spare flanges for the transaxle on eBay, and I sent all of it out to get cryo treated at Fireball Heat Treating up in Massachusetts. It's this guy Tommy that's in our club, awesome guy. He takes care of all of us. If anybody needs to get their shit cryo treated or in New England, he is the guy to go to. I think everybody around here knows it, but just a plug for him, because he's the man. And there's a lot of data out there that supports that what he does definitely helps things hold up longer. So
So that is super cool information for me. Um, in the in my rig's future, I'm looking at doing coilovers. I might as well just grab an '05 Plus and build a different housing.
Sure.
So when I do that, I will definitely send the gear set out because
Yep.
I should have done that with this rig on this gear set.
It's a pretty low cost thing to do. Depending on, I mean,
It can't hurt.
you got it.
Is
It definitely does not hurt. I mean, it's somewhat kind of personal data and everything, but like or just personal experience. But like Eugene has sworn that he was breaking Toyota third members way more frequently until he started having Tommy cryo them. So and I believe it. I really believe it. It's sort of like the yin and yang to heat treating. It's like you heat treat it and then you kind of like relieve the stress in the other direction by cryo treating. So it as an engineer, it makes sense to me. But
So that's one area that I have a lot of experience with, and we are going to go down a massive
I
divergence.
actually
there we go.
don't.
No, we're not.
We're,
No,
I
we're
think
not.
we might be nearing a wrap-up point.
When it sounds like Luke
Oh,
has
sorry.
food in his mouth when he doesn't, it's
Actually, I do have food in my mouth. So that
oh
was
my
me
god!
just
So you
being
didn't even
rude.
have the common courtesy to stop chewing.
Oh yeah, no, that was just me being rude.
Oh my god. Okay.
Well,
I apologize.
we're rapidly approaching 3 hours, which is fine. Just letting you guys know. Let's
No.
hit this and then we'll wrap up.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Um, so long story short, when you're talking about heat treatment, the drawdown process is far more important to me than the initial heating process, and I feel like far too many people skip the drawdown process, which is where you let it sit at like 600 degrees and then you cut the flame temperature back to 400 degrees in order to actually get the crystals in the metal to properly align and want to for a lack of better term, well, I guess alignment would be it, but they, by skipping that process and rushing through it, you end up with a weaker structure overall, even though you're talking about taking a 3-hour drawdown and making it into a 5-hour drawdown. I feel like it is better to do a 5-hour drawdown.
Drawdown.
Sure.
And then especially if you can add cryo treating on the opposite end of that, that's how you get a significantly stronger part. That's how you can make 4140 start acting like it's 4150.
Sure.
All right, that's all I've got for that.
So,
Sure.
so I guess just then so I've got the transaxle buggy. I did some weird stuff. So I really want to the thing obviously the thing with the transaxle buggy is that you're stuck with four-wheel drive all the time. So because I had some horse trading to do with Dan at one point, I ended up with a set of Yukon lockouts at the hardcore hubs. So I have those on the front. So if I really want to be in two-wheel drive, I can just flip those hubs and it'll be in two-wheel drive. But I also really want the capability of being in front-wheel drive on the trail for doing digs and stuff like that. So my initial concept with that was a Dodge Dana 60. They have that CAD lockout system.
Yep.
So I tried that, and that lasted probably like a half a dozen wheeling runs or so before I had issues, because all that stuff is meant to be bathed in lubricant all the time. It's basically meant to be in gear lube all the time. And so I wore out the fork, and I didn't even realize I was wearing out the pads on the fork, and then I was wearing out the fork itself, and then all of a sudden I was at Roush and like it wouldn't stay in four-wheel drive, and I was like, okay, this is a problem. So I built just like an intermediate shaft to just replace all that, and I was like, I'll just revisit it later. So I think the next revision of that is going to look like a Toyota output shaft. So there's a company that makes a disconnect yoke for a Toyota transfer case output. I think actually I think Mike Catrini has one of the, or well, actually it's Bob now. Bob, so he's got one of those on the Samurai transfer case that's on the Taylor's old Samurai that Bob has now. So it's basically just like a it's very similar to like what you would see in a transfer case or whatever. It's got some wear pads and stuff like that, but it's just like you can just kind of pop the that fork off of the rear output and disengage it. So I have a Toyota output transfer case output that I got from Rob Conley, and I'm at some point I'd like they're like $500 or $600 to buy those outputs. So I'd like to try to do that at some point, sort of re-engineer that mid shaft to accept that, so I can have a front wheel drive. But I mean, at the end of the day, this buggy is kind of a budget build. I mean, it's definitely not like the type of thing that's got Atlas and you can just hammer on it, and I do worry about overloading some of that stuff sometimes, but at the end of the day, it's like I'm that's sort of the poison that I've chosen to swallow, and there's no getting out of this stuff without spending money at some point or another. So
I think that's a bridge to cross when you get there.
yeah, exactly.
You'll
And
learn
it's like,
eventually.
there's I think High Angle Driveline, what they had advertised at one point that they're like, we'll make any yoke you need to, and I'm like, all right, cool, I'll save that link. So it's like when I start breaking those Volkswagen flanges, it's like, hey, can you CNC me up like a 4340, stupid whatever Volkswagen, like here's one. Can you just make me one of these? Can you make me one of these at a 4340 and then I'll get it cryo treated? Like, is that a thing? Like, can you do that? But honestly, it's held up really, everything is held up really, really well at this point. And I'm really happy with it. And so this winter I sold the Comanche, or actually it was in the fall I sold, and that's I kind of decided that I needed to kind of get back into a daily driver that was a little bit more practical and less something something that I did a drivetrain swap on, and I got some money for it, and the guy that bought it was really happy, and that's cool and everything, and so I turned it into some 42s, and honestly, that I had seen the writing on the wall for that for a while. And it's like where I wheel, Field and Forest, it's getting excavated, to be honest with you. And I think Bob even mentioned that when he was on the podcast. And the people, 5 years ago, it was the people with 37s were aggravated with the people that had 39s for digging holes, and now the people with 39s are aggravated with the people that have 42s and 43s are digging holes. So at the end of the day, it is sort of a kind of trying to catch up game or stay on top of it game.
Yeah, it's an arms race. It's never ending.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It's an arms race. It's totally an arms race. So, and I got, it's 2016 to 2020, 2021 out of the 39s. They're still probably worth something, although I'm having trouble selling them, which I'm surprised about. But, if I get another 5-something years out of some 42s, and I kind of doubt that BFG is going to come out with something bigger than that anytime soon, but that's kind of where I'm at for now. And all my shafts are 4340 and chrome motor and all that stuff, so I'm just kind of hoping everything holds up, and I don't have a motor that makes a ton of horsepower and a ton of torque way down low. So but yeah, it's got to just kind of keep moving, and I'm excited to just kind of keep going with everything. And I've already started thinking about what I want to do next. I don't have any solid ideas about it. Actually, the next thing that I'll probably do is build a kid's buggy, and I have some ideas about that too. But I still got a few years before I worry about that. But
fair enough.
Yeah.
The kids buggy stuff is always kind of cool because it's so small. They're so little.
Cool. So cool.
that'll be fun. It's a good change of pace.
Yeah, Nate Gilbert. I'm sure his name has come up on your podcast before. Just super talented dude. Just really, really smart and really talented, and also just like super humble about all of it. He has his son, I think, is like 10 or 11, and a few years ago he started building him a buggy, and it's got like samurai axles and like a Honda ATV, transmission and a Samurai transfer case and hydraulic steering. The thing is so freaking cool.
That's
It
cool.
is so freaking cool. I should say, like on our thread, I'll send you guys some videos of the thing driving, and like he just loves it, and he's like driving up some like blue trails at Field and Forest, just like you know, like letting the thing sing, and Nate's like pushing on the side of the chassis to get it. Oh, it's just like it's so cool. Like I want to be out there doing that with, you know, I hope my daughter wants to do that, and you know, I hope I have some influence over that, but like I want to do that, and like we have a little bit of property here, and not a ton. We got like an acre, a little over an acre. Like I want to build a little thing through the woods, and she can drive that around, and so like I really. That's the next thing that I want to do for sure. And you know, I have some ideas, and but I'm looking forward to doing that too. So,
Oh yeah.
Hell yeah. So I gotta ask, you know, we're getting close to closing time. You got any questions for us?
I don't know if I have any questions for you guys. I've listened to a handful of your guys' podcasts, and I really like what you're doing. I think it's, even if it's sort of like a, you know, it's a New England. I mean, have you had? To be honest with you, I haven't been way up on it. Is it mainly kind of like a New England centric thing?
Yeah, East Coast. They
Vaguely East Coast kind of
vaguely
thing.
East Coast.
Yeah.
We have
All
West Coast people on. Like we're not like biased towards having them on, but there's a lot of
There
West
is.
Coast off-roading podcasts already, and there's
Yeah.
not.
Sure.
I don't think there's any New England off-road. Maybe no, there are. Built for the East,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't record too often. Those ones are a riot.
Yeah.
But there's just not a lot of like coverage for the little buggy guys who are out here, and there's some cool shit.
Wow.
So
We
and-
do some of the guys from out west who are like girls, because we can't, you know, Crazy K's. She was awesome.
Yep.
They have to have like a specific story that we are interested in sharing with our listeners.
Sure.
Like we'll handpick them, but like the guys who are like, dude, you should talk to this guy. If there was some random West Coast dude, sorry West Coast guys, but like if somebody said that, I'd be like, okay, I don't care. Like who's that dude? Like what is his special thing? We're out here, we're like, oh fuck it, yeah, we've seen that guy, we know of him. Like let's bring him on. That
yeah,
kind of stuff.
it's like just grabbing people, friends of people we know, or just people in the area, right? It's just cool to network with other people in New England.
And
Cool
it's
people
kind
It's
of
not in New
expanded.
England, so we've expanded sort of to like Tennessee, Georgia, and there's some really cool guys in that area too.
Yep.
So it's fun. Meeting people's fun. Talking to people's fun.
Yeah, and it's like we're all doing the same thing at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yep.
And you know, whatever your intentions are, and your budget is, and your skill is, and whatever, you know, we're all out here to just, you know, try to drive up some rocks.
Yep.
All right.
At the end of the
And-
day.
Everybody has a lot of different ways of getting there and doing that, and I appreciate all of it. So
last question before we close it out. Hit us
Yep.
with some dad advice, Dad.
Yeah.
dad advice.
You're always my favorite, by the way.
What's your favorite?
Dad advice.
The
I don't
dad
know why,
advice?
but dad too off road. I always seem to give some cool
I've been a
advice.
dad for about like 4.5 months now.
Mhm.
I would say sleep as much as possible before you have kids. That's probably number one. Just like get it all in. Like you don't trick yourself into thinking that you'll be able to catch up on that, but just appreciate it, because that doesn't happen a whole lot anymore. Unless you can get your kid to fall asleep with you, which does happen occasionally, but nothing you should count on.
Got that right.
Yeah, that's probably the number one thing. Come back at me with right now she's not portable, you know, she's just kind of doing, or you know, she's just kind of it's like she's just kind of at the mercy of whatever we set her down on, and give her to eat and whatever. I bring me back in a month, and I bet or a year, I mean, and I bet I'll have a lot more thoughts on that front.
Child
well,
everything, and then child
Right.
proof to child proofing.
Right now it's basically just like make sure she's not hungry, make sure that she's sleeping, and make sure she doesn't have a dirty diaper. and
Boom.
and then just like smile at her and make weird faces, and she loves it. So it's a lot of work to do all of those things, but I expect that work is gonna sort of turn into something else that's probably a lot more tasking in the next year. But
You'll figure
I'm
that
ready
out.
for it. I'm ready for it. She came to Field and Forest with us this past weekend, and she did absolutely fantastic. She loves being outside. She is just like a really sweet little baby, and I'm sitting right here right now, across my fingers, that if we ever have another one, she'll be like this, because she loves people. She loves being outside. She loves watching. So if you're into this stuff and you have a baby like that, I think you're doing pretty good. I feel very good about it.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I will
Luke, wrap
take it on out if you guys are good with that.
We are. Take us
All
out.
right. So then, on that note, if you're gonna have a kid, make sure that you have cryo treated your Volkswagen half shafts and transaxle parts, so that way when you are laying up at night because you can't sleep with the kid, your axle parts are not going to keep you up.
You have that peace of mind. Nothing beats that peace of mind, baby.